in terms of what it means for resources, for Mars exploration. Okay, underground water, surface ice, okay, carbon dioxide atmosphere, carbon dioxide water, you've got the stuff you need for development, you got the stuff you need for life, okay? Water on the moon is good, but although if you want to use it, you have to actually go to the moon, not to lunar orbit. Okay, that's an important point. Okay.
Put that on the calendar. Where was it?
Okay. Yet to find substantial supplies of carbon on the moon, and that's important because for carbon-based life forms, we are made of carbon. Everything we eat is made of carbon. Everything we wear is made of carbon. Everything we use is either made of carbon or made using carbon. So the water on the moon does definitely enhance our capabilities for exploring the moon. But if we want to settle in a world of carbon, Mars. And there it is. So. And by the way, let me tell you something, because there was another paper published a few weeks ago that made some headlines. In the 1990s, a very widely read paper was published saying that there could not be water ice on Mars at mid-latitudes. The author was a man named Bruce Jakowski. He's the person who published the paper a few weeks ago saying there is enough CO2 on Mars to terraform it. And that paper it's not scientifically sound because all the Maven does is measure the amount of CO2 that Mars has lost, which he says, according to his measurements, which some people dispute, but I'll give him because he's arguing from his data, he's lost half a bar in its history, but that doesn't tell you how much is left. And in fact, we know because of the water erosion features on the surface of Mars that Mars once had at least 2 bars of CO2 in its atmosphere. So far from there not being enough CO2 on Mars, to terraform it, the Maven result supports the theory very much so that there is enough CO2 as far as it goes. But that's another story. Discuss that. But okay, so in the areas of space astronomy and planetary exploration, the official space programs have truly delivered. Okay, in the human spaceflight area, they've been adrift for 40 years. And they continue to be adrift at this point. It's reached the point of satire. But I would say it's okay, but there's been a solution. Because every problem creates a solution. Every problem creates a need, necessity for another invention, and it has given birth into quite the child. SpaceX. Okay, we have a revolution going on right now in spaceflight, an extraordinary revolution. This is something that people talked about. Musk is actually a science fiction character. He's in the novel Firestar, for example, by Michael Flynn. Except there, the Musk is a woman. It's Dee Dee Harriman, Heinlein had him decades ago. But he finally appeared out of the world of fiction into the world of reality. And look, February this year, Falcon Heavy launch. I think almost everyone here saw that. And this was a tour de force. Not only, look, in 2009, the Obama administration wanted to kill the Bush Moon program, so they pulled together a blue ribbon committee headed by Norm Augustine, the CEO of Lockheed Martin. And they concluded that the Bush Moon program was financially impossible because it needed a heavy lift launch vehicle. Developing one would take 12 years and $36 billion. Okay, Musk did it in a 6-year program for less than $1 billion. Half the time, 1/30th the cost of what had been projected. And not only that, the thing's 3/4 reusable. So that's a shot heard around the world. And now, of course, they're proceeding with the VFR, which we'll talk about in a minute, which will be even much more capable. But the significant thing about Musk, even if Musk was to fail at this point, he has already succeeded. Because he has demonstrated that it is possible for a private entrepreneurial team, well led, to do things that previously had been thought that only governments of major powers can do. And so he has set off the gold rush. There are going to be more SpaceXs. There'll be, mean, there's already a couple more in the United States that are competing with them. Blue Origin, most notably, Stratolaunch, Virgin Galactic, but there will be a Russian SpaceX. I happen to know there are people there that want to do it. There's a Ukrainian SpaceX emerging. There's the Chinese SpaceXs, you can bet on that. The Indian, okay, the people are going to want to do this, and they're doing it. And by the way, not only in this sphere, okay, there are now fusion SpaceXs. You know, I worked a little bit in the fusion program in the 1980s, and I can remember we had a lunch, and the group leader said to us, you know, when fusion is finally developed, it's not going to be developed in a place like Los Alamos or Livermore. It's going to be developed by a crackpot working in his garage. Okay, well, probably not a crackpot in a garage, but a startup in a warehouse, yes. Okay, and some of these startups have now gotten hundreds of millions of dollars of money to pursue new approaches to fusion that are outside of the mainstream, which is real narrow to a single international tokamak, which with all the bureaucracy that implies and the limited innovation that implies. So this is happening. So creative forces have been unleashed as a result of that. And it's now clear, okay, how we can get to Mars. Now, you know, I'm an engineer, and so for the past 30 years, I have been advocating a clean engineering approach for these Mars, known as Mars Direct. You can do it with two heavy lift launches. The first launch shoots off to Mars, the Earth return vehicle with no one in it. Run pumps, sucks in the Martian air, reacts it with hydrogen. Martian air is carbon dioxide. You make methane and oxygen propellant. Now you have a fully fueled Earth return vehicle sitting on the surface of Mars. Once that's done, you use the other launcher. You send a habitat module out to Mars, something about the size of the NDRS station, which, by the way, was designed specifically to make it flight-like in this respect, 8 meters in diameter, launchable. Boom, you send that to Mars. Crew flies out to Mars from that. You land on Mars from that. That's their habitat on Mars. That's their lab on Mars. After a year and a half exploring, they get in the Earth return vehicle, fly home. They leave the habitat behind on Mars. Each time you do this, you add another habitat to the base before you end up at the beginning of a new world. This is the basic plan, Mars Direct. Direct to Mars, direct back from the surface using locally produced power. Okay? You don't have to build gigantic interplanetary spaceships, new orbiting space stations, okay, and all this kind of stuff. Okay. Okay, so Musk has picked up on that. He's developed his own design. Initially, it was quite grandiose, the ITS, 500 tons to orbit, 500 tons to Mars, but moderated that to be more realistic, 150 tons to orbit, fully reusable, and then he wants to send it all the way to Mars and back. Now, I wouldn't use it that way. I would just put 150 tons to orbit, and then shoot the payload to Mars from there, and that's a fully reusable heavy vehicle. You can do Mars Direct with that. There it is, with the launcher fully reusable. If you want to deliver over 100 tons to Mars with throw, you can refuel the VFR and bring it up to, so it then goes from low Earth orbit to a translunar injection type orbit, which is to say an elliptical orbit just short of Earth escape, and then release the payload, and with a very small push, the payload flies off to Mars. The VFR is back in low Earth orbit a week after it left, and you can reuse it 10 times during the launch window instead of once every other launch window, which is what you have to do if you send it all the way to Mars and back. But they're cash on that. So anyway, the point is, they've got the machine. And not only that, the thing that VFR is very well designed for is point-to-point intercontinental travel on Earth. Okay? And if you think about it, if you want to have the real space revolution or reduce the cost of launching to orbit by not a factor of 5, which is what SpaceX has already accomplished. Yeah. Okay. Or 6. I mean, Falcon Heavy is twice the payload of an Atlas at 1/3 the cost. It's a factor of 6. Twice the payload of the Delta IV Heavy and a third the cost. Three times the Atlas, 1/2 the cost. Twice the Delta IV Heavy, 1/3 the cost. Factor of 6. Okay. But if you want to reduce it by a factor of 100, we need to increase the launch rate by a factor of 100. There's only about 100 satellite launches occur every year worldwide, and they've already gotten about 40% of that market, which is incredible. But they'll cheapen the cost, there'll be more satellites. So, okay, maybe we'll double or triple the number of satellites. It's still not enough to get us to 100 pounds, $100 a pound to orbit. But while there's only 100 and maybe 200 or 300 satellite launches a year, there's thousands of intercontinental flights every day. And if you can take part of that market, then you can reduce the cost of space launch, so the cost of going to space will be comparable to a first-class ticket from Los Angeles to Sydney. So this thing has been unleashed, and it's, as I say, it's not just Musk. He has opened the door because people say if he can do it, I can do it. And that's not necessarily true. He's pretty good, but nevertheless, there are other smart people in the world, and they will try, and that's the key thing. And then the other thing that's been shown, and this was something that I was not a leader in, but one of the people who was, Rick Tomlinson, is going to be here tonight giving a little talk, the new space revolution of doing things not by having the government do it itself, but contracting services from entrepreneurial organizations. And look, Dragon, has been developed and flying, and a tiny fraction of the time is Orion, which isn't even flying yet, and not to mention a tiny fraction of the cost. So this commercial off-the-shelf program that showed that you could deliver payloads to the space station, this is how we can do the moon and Mars. We don't have to wait for NASA to develop its giant interplanetary spaceship to depart from the interplanetary space station in a crazy orbit around the moon. They say, look, we want this much payload delivered to Mars and this much payload delivered back. How much do you charge for that? Okay, and then allocate contracts on that basis. On that basis, we can have a moon base within 4 years and Mars base within 8, if we want to do that. And that's the kind of program that we need. So, look, the fundamental issue is this. The reason why the space astronomy and planetary robotic exploration programs have delivered and the human spaceflight program has not is because those are purpose-driven programs. The human spaceflight program has become a vendor-driven program. Purpose-driven program spends money to do things. A vendor-driven program does things in order to spend money. Okay, and that's the problem. Okay, it's nothing to do with the inherent difficulty of human spaceflight. Okay, I mean, look, what Musk did with first Falcon 1 and Falcon 9 was show that the problem of access to orbit was not fundamentally technological; it was organizational. The cost plus contracting, etc., driving, creating no incentive to cut launch costs, creating no incentive to reusable vehicles. I mean, I was proposed a reusable vehicle to the management of Lockheed Martin when I was there, and they said, this is really smart, Bob, but if we built one of these and sell it to the Air Force, we're out of business. That was a bit hyperbolic, but that's how they viewed it. So the idea is to create a structure where the incentive for the contractors to not to do things as expensively as possible. And Martin used to say at Martin Marietta, overhead is our most important project. Okay, because you can charge 5% overhead. Now, but you create fixed price competitive contracting where it's the incentive to the contractor to cut costs, to bone, because whatever is left after their cost is their profit. And that's how things need to be. But we need a purpose-driven human spaceflight program. Human spaceflight program needs a goal. That goal should be humans to Mars. It should be humans to Mars because Mars is where the science is, it's where the challenge is, it's where the future is. Okay? It's where the science is, it's where we can discover the truth about the potential prevalence and diversity of life in the universe. You can't do that on the moon, certainly not in lunar orbit. Okay? Mars is where the challenge is, and challenge is important. Civilizations are like individuals. We grow and we challenge ourselves, we stagnate when we do not. A Humans to Mars program would be a tremendous brace and challenge to every country that participated in it, and tremendous challenge to their youth in particular. I would say to every kid, learn your science, you can be a pioneer of new worlds. And out of that challenge, we get millions of scientists, engineers, inventors, technological entrepreneurs, doctors, medical researchers. Okay, intellectual capital is the basis of the wealth of a nation. Okay, you think you're going to get intellectual capital by testing the kids to death every week? Okay, which is what the educationalists are proposing? No, you want to further education, inspire the kids. That's the real program to do. And finally, the future. Because if we do what we can do in our time, which is establish that first human foothold on Mars, okay, then 500 years from now, there will not only be several new branches of human civilization on Mars, and perhaps thousands in the asteroids, okay, but thousands more on planets orbiting nearby stars, okay, because Mars is not the final destination. Mars is just the direction. Okay. So we need a goal. The goal should be moving to Mars. What's our role? Two things: disperse the fog, spread the vision. Okay, there's all kinds of fog out there. That Joukowsky paper is fog, but actually more important fog being spread right now is as an excuse, frankly. What I call a snow day. Certain people in the space establishment are saying we shouldn't go to Mars for the sake of science, because if we go to Mars, we will not know if we discover life there, whether it's indigenous or not. Okay, this is an absurd argument. Let me tell you why. If you go to Mars and you find a life that differs from what we see on Earth, you didn't bring it. Okay? If we go to Mars and we find life that is identical to what we see on Earth, but it has also biomarkers and fossils from having been there in the past. See, if it's indigenous, it was also there in the past, and there would be evidence of that. Okay, unless you're a creationist, you believe the fossils on Earth were put here by God to fool us into believing that there was a past. Okay. Well, the fossils on Mars, okay, some people might think they were put there on God to fool us into believing that they were there in the past. But most people of the scientific outlook would say, no, that would prove that they were there before we got there. This is also, by the way, how you know that the French exist. Okay, a lot of people wonder if they go to France, how do they know that there are really French people that were there before you got there? Because for all you know, they might have come just at the same day as you. Well, you can know because there are artifacts that have been left behind by the French who existed in the past. Similarly, if there are Martian microbes today and beyond indigenous, they will have been there in the past. Okay, and you will know just as surely as you know that the French exist. Okay. Now, if all you find, though, are microbes that are identical to Earth life, and there is no evidence that they existed before you got there, then yes, you're wrong. So that's how you know. Okay. So this argument has got to be defeated. Other arguments that all the dangers of radiation. I mean, it's amazing. People who scream about radiation in space, you can't expose people to radiation in space, want to put them in a station orbiting the moon to expose them to radiation. But whatever. Okay. So the point is this. Okay. Disperse the fog, spread the vision. Victor Hugo said, "Nothing can stop an idea whose time has come." Okay. Why is it that nothing can stop an idea whose time has come? Because an idea recruits people to spread it and recruits people to its banners to actualize it. Why is Musk and Bezos doing what they're doing? Okay? Musk read my book, Bezos read Gerard O'Neill's book, okay, and other books, of course. I'm not taking full credit here, but it's clear that certain ideas have influenced people. They're not doing it for the money. Bezos makes a lot more on Amazon, and Musk certainly knows easier ways to make money than starting a rocket company. You can make money doing anything, okay? Make money with electric cars. Whoever made money with electric cars. Who invented the electric car? Edison. He couldn't make money with it, and he was pretty smart. Now, but they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the idea. They have been recruited to the idea, and we spread this idea. We will recruit more Musks and more Bezos and more people who are in positions to influence government policy. The government is still needed, and not just to pursue this wonderful science program. Okay, it's needed to say, look, our objective is humans to Mars. Okay, so we will contract the services. So Musk and Bezos don't have to do it all. They need all sorts of other technologies in addition to their flying technologies. All sorts of technology for generating power on Mars, for making in situ propellant, for making fabric, steel, all sorts of things that people are going to need. They're going to need all sorts of vehicles and systems, and basically to say that they're going to do this all as a charity endeavor is asking too much. They're doing their bit right now by lowering by orders of magnitude the costs of such a program. But at the end, someone's going to still have to pay the reduced costs. And so there is a need for a public-private partnership here. We need to make the government an intelligent customer, okay, for this. That the government it says, hey, we want to do this. And now how can we do it? And we can now propose to them, you can do this. You can do this within the existing massive budget. You don't need to triple it. You don't need to double it. You don't need to increase it 30%. Okay, although 30% be okay. But no, we do not need profound increases. What we need is intelligent leadership. And so, in conclusion, we're not living at the end of science. We're living at the beginning of science. We have entered into an age of great discoveries, which is going to expand enormously. TESS, the follow-up to Kepler, is already in orbit, and it will produce hundreds of times the results of Kepler. Webb will follow it. These heavy lift probes, fully reusable launch vehicles. I mean, it's tragic. They're going to spend at least 4 or 5 heavy lift launches to build this lunar orbiting station. That's 400 tons in low Earth orbit. You could launch 20 first-class interplanetary probes without much launch to wheel. 20 Galileos and Cassinis, curiosities. Okay. But still, with that launch capability of BFR, it's going to be amazing what we're going to do. And we're living at the beginning of history. I mean, quite literally. I mean, sure, it's been okay. We've gotten the overture done here, getting out of Africa and establishing a global type 1 civilization. But now, type 2, where we become a spacefaring interplanetary species, roaming the solar system, in which there are thousands of worlds. People talk about bringing back metals from the asteroids, and maybe we will. And so certainly we can start asteroid exploration as soon as we pass a bill allowing people to stake claims. But I think the real benefit from the asteroid will be homes for new branches of human civilization. Thousands of new worlds with different people, non-conforming people with different ideas of how human society should be organized, and therefore not popular among the general group behind, will have a chance to give their ideas a spin. And many of those ideas will fail because the reason why they're not used here is because they're not practical or workable. But some succeed, and they'll show the way for the rest of us. And expanding the solar system will create a much more potent humanity that will be able to take on the challenges of achieving type 3, spacefaring interstellar travel. That will come. So if we do what we can do in our time, diversify, spread the vision, establish humanity on Mars, and 500 years from now, there will be human civilizations on thousands of worlds in our solar system and others. Something as grand compared to what we are today as we are compared to our distant ancestors, the local species that existed in the Canyon of the Fowl, and then took on the challenges of settling the rest of the Earth. Because, we're not native to the Earth, we're native to the Canyon. We've got these thin arms with no fur. We're tropical. We couldn't live in North America, Europe, or Asia if we had not developed technology. But we did. We're creative. Okay? And that's why we're going to inherit the stars. Thank you. I'm running a bit over time, but I'll take a question or two. Come on, there's got to be someone with a question. All right.
What was that white password again?
Okay, another question.
There's one interesting thing about the previous RTR architecture that SpaceX used. It was a very large spaceship to Mars that could also then travel along Europa, land there. There was a graphic that showed the RTR spaceship. Now, the current BFR probably can't do that without refueling in Mars orbit. Maybe you think that Musk kept sending a BFR to Mars in order to also send a tanker so it could further explore the solar system.
I don't think the BFR should go to Mars, and certainly not to Europa. I think what the BFR is a fully usable launch vehicle that can do intercontinental flight, can do Earth to orbit fully reusable, and the refueling can go all the way to just short of Earth escape. But after that, you want to stage off of it. Taking it all the way to Mars, first of all, puts it out of action for 4 years, because it doesn't get back until the launch opportunity after the next. And furthermore, it enormously increases your ISRU requirement to refuel the entire BFR upper stage to send it back. Why send this massive, hundreds of tons BFR upper stage all the way to Mars, to only be able to use it every 4 years, when you can keep it in geocentric space? You could use it 10 times every other year. Okay, so you're getting 20 times the utility out of it. And furthermore, I mean, if you're delivering payloads to Mars, keep them on Mars. What goes to Mars should stay on Mars. Okay, no, really, you don't want to bring this stuff back. We have a lot of stuff here already. And in particular, if your goal is settlement, which is the goal of the BFR, the idea of the settlement is one-way travel. Now, you might want to have some small capability to bring a few people back, deserters and so forth. You want to try and shoot. But if you deliver 100-ton or 500-ton habitat to Mars capable of housing people, why do you want to ship it back to Earth empty? That doesn't make sense. Now, so what Musk does is he comes up with grand ideas, what NASA sometimes calls horizon ideas. Here's the vision. But then he is smart enough to moderate that to the point where it becomes practical. So he sets something really hard to do and then pulls back from it just enough to make it work. And and I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see BFR, first incarnation, fully reusable, 150-ton to orbit vehicle. And you got a fully reusable Saturn V here. What can't you do with that? You can do anything you want. Thank you. So our next speaker is going to be Michael Meyer. We're going to talk about the future of U.S. Mars exploration. And Michael is, you're going to introduce him? Don't you?
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Michael Meyer, as Robert said, is our next speaker. He is a senior scientist at NASA Science Mission Directorate in Washington, D.C. He oversees the Mars program's science operations and planning, and also serves as program scientist for the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity mission, which 7 years ago this month landed up to 776. This it's the anniversary. He was the scientist for astrobiology for the 2001 Mars Odyssey mission. He also works on planetary protection mission that will come up at some point. Dr. Meyer.
A little nervous about following Bob. It occurred to me, just 2 years after the publication of End of Science, it was just 2 years before that we confirmed the first planet around another star, and also ALH 84001 reporting evidence of life on Mars. Anyways, I thought that was... Well, something may show up. So what I want to do is kind of basically, I'll talk to what I know. And so I'll tell you about the Mars program, where we are, what our intentions are, some of the things that we've discovered recently, and then be here for questions. So how's the Mars program doing? All our missions right now are doing very well. I would say the only one that's up in the air is Opportunity, because we haven't heard from it since May. But things are looking a little bit better. I'll talk a little bit about its circumstances and the status of the global dust storm that's going on. We are progressing very well in what we're developing in terms of future missions. 2020 has gone through a milestone, and that basically the hardware is now being cut for the mission itself. And also a helicopter has been added as a technology demonstration. The MoMA, the instrument that will go on ExoMars, also in 2020, is capable of measuring organics. It also has a laser desorption mass spectrometer, so it could measure heavy organics, very refractory materials, and I think that will be a really interesting thing, what that mission will find out. Maven, Bruce Zukoski, who's the PI of that mission, who we heard about already. That mission has been very successful in measuring the solar wind interaction with the Mars atmosphere and getting measurements on how much loss there is from solar wind blowing Mars atmosphere away. And this year we'll be moving into a lower orbit to basically facilitate communications, and yet still be able to do about 80% of the science that it's doing right now. We are progressing very well on technologies that we need for Mars sample return. And one of the things that has happened this last year is getting ready for the next decadal survey for planetary sciences. So essentially that will be kicked off in the beginning of January, and basically almost a 2-year process to map out what we want to do in the following decade. And they just released a midterm report a couple of weeks ago. So one of the things that happened in this year is very good news for our budget, in that the Mars budget has gone up, which is it's been going through some tough times for the last 5-6 years. And what that does is it helps us keep the missions going that we have going, and also affords us the money to progress in development of the missions that we hope to do in the future, such as 2020, and also start planning for a Mars sample return. So we're busy putting that together so that hopefully we'll be in the next budget cycle. Other things that are going on, InSight is launched. This is a discovery mission, so it's not officially part of the Mars program, but certainly it is something that every Martian is looking forward to in measuring the geodesy of Mars. It's a little bit over halfway there now and lands the day after Thanksgiving, in case you wake up from all your turkey and want something to do. Also, we're doing sort of an experiment with 2 CubeSats that are going along, and what they're going to do is provide communications for the entry, descent, landing inside itself. So that'll be interesting to see how well that works. Trace Gas Orbiter is in its science orbit now, so we're looking very much forward to the measurements that it's going to make. It also has the advantage of carrying Electra, so we have some backup for communications in case our aging assets don't make it through 2020. And then also we're teaming up with JAXA and providing an instrument and some technology for sampling. And that should be very interesting going to the moons of Mars. So what's been going on? So one of the things that you might be aware of is Curiosity, the 1-ton rover on Mars that landed in 2012. The drill feed mechanism was not working. And so we went through a hiatus of over a year of not being able to drill. So they come up with a different way of doing it. They moved the drill feed out of the way. And so basically now, it's a couple months ago, they finally drilled using the method on a rock called Duluth. And that's been very exciting. And things are moving ahead. I'll talk a little bit more about some complex organics that have been found on Mars. And then that small picture in the bottom, let's see, does that arrow show up? Okay, I think I'm circling, I can't actually see it. That's a difference in the lighting because of the global dust storm, looking at the same rock. And as you can see, later into the dust storm, you're getting a preference for longer wavelengths. So, and just recently, we finally drilled another rock, a second drilling with the new technique. We had a bit of a problem. This is the 3rd try, and what we've discovered is the rocks on Vera Rubin Ridge, which is where the rover is now, are harder than the rocks we tried to drill in the past. And it wasn't until our third try at finding slightly softer rock that we were able to do a sample. And analysis on that sample is going on right now. So let me talk a little bit about some of the more important results that have happened recently. One is, as you might remember, when Curiosity landed within the first year, it drilled a sample in Cumberland. This is in Yellowknife Bay, and found organics. They're chlorinated compounds, and this is very exciting to find them, and also it helps fuel and perhaps solve the mystery of chlorinated compounds that actually Viking. And what it does is it points to the idea that, yeah, there are organic compounds on Mars, but there's still a debate about how much is left. It's still lower than what we would expect just from meteoritic infall. And a big debate about what's happening to them and what process is scavenging the organics that we see. Well, it turns out that on another sample called Mojave, this is at the base of Mount Sharp, it's still part of sort of what we consider sort of the lake complex that surrounds Mount Sharp in the base of Gale Crater. And we drilled there, and lo and behold, with a lot of work, they all sort out that at the higher temperatures beyond the realm where perchlorate operates, so one of the things that we strongly suspect has happened to the organics on Mars, at least for our being able to measure them, is that as you heat the sample, perchlorate that's in the soil basically combines with any organics and cooks them and off the CO2 at basically lower temperature, between 200 and 400 centigrade. Well, more after a lot of lab work, the idea was, well, there may still be some very refractory compounds that perchlorate doesn't affect, and maybe we can find them. So they did some work and found at higher temperatures, you can get some organics coming off. And they found that there are some sulfur organics that are combined with sulfur. And it turns out the sulfur is helping preserve the heavier weight organics, similar to, it's called vulcanization, similar to what we do with rubber on our tires. And so this is actually very promising in telling us that there are larger molecular weight compounds on Mars, something to be looking for. And then if we find a place where they have not been irradiated by galactic cosmic rays or UV radiation, that there may be enough organics there to be preserved and for us to be able to identify them and be able to tell what their source is. Now here's just a cool picture of a hairy shot of Curiosity, but showing you the ring compounds that have been found at coming off at higher temperatures from the sand analysis. So out of that, we have reconvinced ourselves that we are looking at organic matter in ancient lake beds. This is organic matter that has been around for over 3.5 billion years and able to survive in one form, lots of radiation. Galactic cosmic rays will penetrate meters of regolith. And the point is, if you can have something survive 3.5 billion years, if you can find something that hasn't been exposed close to the surface until recently, then you should be able to find many more organic compounds that will actually give you a better sense of their origin. It actually expands the period of time that we think that Mars is inhabitable, and it certainly adds to our quiver in terms of number of types of strategies that we might use to discover evidence of life on Mars if there ever was. Okay, let's move on to the global dust storm, also known as a PEED, Planet Encircling Dust Event. So near the end of May, it was a local dust storm spotted in the northern hemisphere, and as it was observed, is moved down the Acidalia chain. Basically, that's kind of near that gore that is showing up. I can't see where they are. It's showing up basically to the left of the M of MERV, which is opportunity. And that moved down the corridor, moving south, and then by January, and we warned Opportunity, hey, there's a dust storm, local dust storm coming, you better hunker down because, as you know, Opportunity is solar powered, and when you turn off the lights, it doesn't work very well. So, but as it moves south, it stalled a little bit in the Meridiani area, and then combined with local dust storms in the south, and we got a planet circling dust. So we've had a global dust storm. The last communication we had with Opportunity, they were able to measure a COW, basically atmospheric capacity, over 10.5, which is pretty impressive. But we have not heard from Opportunity since then. Here's what you would think. This is what you see from Opportunity as you increase the tau. Tau around 1 is sort of typical on more dusty seasons during Mars. In the bottom left, you see a graph that has power to the solar panels on Opportunity in red, and what the atmosphere tau, measurement of tau is in blue. And as you can see, as the dust storm arrives, precipitous drop in the amount of solar power, and also the corresponding rise in tau. Even Curiosity sees the dust and has measured increases in tau. I think it's gone a little bit over 5 that it's been measured. And now it's actually dropped down, we think, around a little bit less than 2. And this has been measured from orbit and kind of estimated what the tau really is. But this gives you an idea of that the dust storm really is has a major effect on the lighting in the air. As Bob mentioned, one of the big discoveries is a subsurface lake in the South Polar Layer deposits. That triangle-looking thing is in fact the radar reflection from Marsus that points to what they consider to be subglacial lake. There's a couple important things about this. It's going to be difficult to confirm that this is true just because you're looking at through 1.5 kilometers of ice. But the other is just from your kind of calculations of the environment, is that the temperature of that water is probably around 205 or so Kelvin. Can't actually measure it directly right now. And that points to, if it is liquid, that it's going to be extremely salty. So it's not something that Earth microbes would be able to take advantage of unless you desalinated it. People can take advantage of it by desalating. As I mentioned, InSight is on its way to Mars. It launched in May from Vandenberg, and it's well on its way, and looking forward to that. All the instruments have checked out. They've gone through the first checkout and cruise phase. That's great news. Then also, Mars 2020, as I mentioned, has been just went through its KDPD, and so that's the last major decision point other than are we going to launch it or not. And this highlights the international involvement that we have on Mars 2020. One of the things instead of going through all the instruments, you can kind of look at those yourself. What I want to do is point out what's different that compared to Curiosity. It uses the same chassis, but there's some fundamental differences. One is we changed the wheels. We thought that might be a good idea. And so they're more robust than the ones we have on Curiosity. It has a subsurface radar provided by the Norwegians, and I think that's going to be very interesting to be able to look in the upper couple of meters as the rover goes around. But its major feature is it got rid of the analytical lab in the interior and it's put in sample caching capability. So this rover is going to go around. It has the ability to identify organics in samples, also remotely because of its SuperCam, and cache samples for a future mission to bring back. So that's going to be the major activity. It has some Raman UV, so it can spot organics. It has a micro X-ray laser so that they can give you elemental composition and distribution on a microscopic scale. And so these are the kind of things that you should be looking for when you're looking to find samples that might have evidence of life. The other thing that you might be interested in is that it also has a contribution from the Human Exploration Program, and that's MOXIE. This is a in situ resource utilization instrument that will take CO2 out of the atmosphere. It will take CO2 from the atmosphere and make oxygen. And its goal is to do that on a regular basis and get oxygen pure enough that then it can be used as the oxygen for future rockets or even for habitats. So we have the Mars program. We're doing very well. One of the things I want to point out, looking at this, is it's starting to get crowded, particularly in the 2020 timeframe. We have other countries sending missions to Mars. And in fact, the Chinese have said that they're going to go to Mars and return samples in a similar time frame that we're sending Mars 2020, and hopefully in the future, if things pan out, that we'll also be able to get those samples. So 2020 ends up being, it could be a real challenge just for our communications, just because of the number of spacecraft that are going to be there and who will want to send their data home. So one of the things that was in this year's budget was to study doing sample returns. So we were busy in going through the architecture. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to go through sort of our mid-architecture review to see whether or not we have the right concepts for how to get the samples left by 2020 and bring them home. And that's going very well. Why sample return now? And that's one of these things where it's been the goal of the program for decades, but why now? Well, we have the infrastructure there, we have orders there, we have the capabilities of sending, we don't have to send orbiter and a linker, or we had no orders there. We are scientifically ready. In fact, in mid-October, we're going to have the last landing site workshop for the science community to pick the landing site that we're going to send 2020. The debate is not whether or not we can find a safe place to land. Quite the contrary, the debate is which place shows the best opportunities for the science. So we know where we want to go. Now the hard part is picking between some very good options. Our science is evolved to the point that what we really want to know about samples from Mars is at the microscopic level. We need to bring those samples home to look at them, and then you have the huge advantage of the latest instruments. You're able to manipulate the samples, and also when you get surprised, you can use a different instrument that you never thought you would be using to follow up on your discoveries. And our technology is there. We think we've already had rocket tests for the Mars Descent Vehicle. We've gone through a lot of testing of how to isolate samples and bring them home. So I think we're ready. Technologically, it's not going to break the bank. And science-wise, we've been waiting for this for quite a bit. So the sample return, we're going to be a very focused, no bells and whistles kind of sample return, but we're not compromising the science of the samples that we bring back. We're going to bring a lot of samples, well chosen by 2020. What's going to be focused on is just doing that, not adding other things to the mission, not driving up the cost. We've been working very hard on partnerships. We have things going. We have just recently, this April, we had an international Mars conference on sample return. Went extremely well. At that meeting in the Berlin, at the same time as the Berlin Air Show, we had the head of ESA and the head of NASA sign science mission director sign a document saying we're going to collaborate on planning on doing sample return. And the great thing about that letter of intent is that it actually maps out the different responsibilities of who's going to study what and what they're going to come forward with. The sample containment is going very well in 2020. That was a big engineering challenge, but it looks like that's going to work well, isolating the samples from the world that we live in, so they come back and what we find will be Martian as opposed to terror. As I mentioned, mentioned, we have more communications in TGO, so we feel fairly robust. And the National Academy of Sciences just put out 2 reports in the last, I guess, month and a half. One is what we should be doing in our decadal survey coming up and how we've been doing so far, in which they re-emphasize there should be a Mars program and that we should be doing sample return. And then also a big challenge that we had over the last several years is planetary protection. So the Academy also did a report on what they think ought to be done for planetary protection, how to move forward on that. So that's all very good. So we have a healthy program. Our missions have been very successful, and I appreciate Bob even complimenting them, saying luckily they know what they want to do, and so it's just about doing it. And we are working on a lower cost way to do Mars sample return. And so I think we're going to be able to do that. We have a good partnership going, and we're preparing the science community for our decadal survey that will be coming up over the next couple of years. And with that, I think the next slide. I'm ready for questions if anybody has. Okay, there's 2 questions. Oh, you can do it.
Thank you for that. Will there be a microphone on Mars 2020, and when will it be activated if there is one, and what would you expect?
So the answer is we plan on having a microphone on 2020. I actually think it's part of the SuperCam. They have figured out by having a microphone, they can get a better idea of the amount of energy that is going into their laser shots, and that actually helps them calibrate what they see in terms of elemental composition, because the strength of the signal gives you a better idea of what energy should be. So the answer is we'll turn it on when we get there. And the only reason I hesitate is I'm not positive it's still on. I think it is, because I haven't heard anything about it being taken off. But that was kind of the add-on after they already got selected. So it's not a critical component of the laser desorption system, but it's I think it will help a lot in terms of understanding the data that we're
Sir, I just was wondering, I read about the possibility of doing something where you could send craft low down and pick up dust, like AKA like a Genesis type thing. Is that worth doing? Would you get the science on it?
Yeah, so there is a proposal a while ago. Oh, Skim was the name of it. Maury Leshin was the PI. That didn't get selected for the mission itself, although it did very well. I think it got a category 1 rating. And there's a corporation called I think it's called Tubodely Gold, and they are hoping to do a form of Skim with private dollars. And so we've been talking to them, and NASA will provide help with communications and navigation, that sort of thing. And I'm just not sure where they are in terms of how well they're doing raising money to actually have the mission accomplished.
Last question.
Can you give us any updates on what steps specifically will be taken over the next decade to increase communication bandwidth between Mars and Earth, other than just send more orbiters?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's I don't know enough about it, but there are ways to increase the bandwidth using the similar technologies that we have now. But I'm just blanking on a better description of it. We don't currently have plans for an orbiter to Mars. The Europeans may be sending to Mars as part of sample return, and whether or not they want to include something that will stay in orbit when the samples come back. That's kind of up to them to figure that out. We put out an RFP, request for proposals, several years ago. The idea of asking the commercial world, hey, do you guys want to send missions to Mars, and we'll buy data. And the proposals that we got back were reasonable and credible. But we haven't done anything more than that to move that forward. I think this is something that's going to come to a head in the next couple of years. Because our assets anyway are aging, and pretty soon we'll be looking at a real dearth of communication capability. On Odyssey and Mars are kind of sort of like the dust.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, for that update on US Mars exploration currently and in the future. And for now, for something completely different, I'm very proud to introduce to you Dr. Balram from JPL. He's the chief engineer and here to share with us the future of Mars exploration via a Mars helicopter. Please welcome Dr. Balram.
Give us a minute to set up here and we'll be on our way. Okay, I can't see that. That's not Mars, that's the Sierras where I go backpacking, but okay, looks good, thank you. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me here to tell you about the Mars helicopter. It's an interesting project that's ongoing at JPL with a bunch of our partners from elsewhere in NASA and AeroVironment. And so here is a short clip of the sound. Concept. So that's the concept in a nutshell. So let's dive into it. This is, your view from orbit on Mars. You get to see a lot of things. We have rovers on the surface, which, do see things in much higher resolution than what an orbiter could see. But even there, there are questions that come about, like what's around the corner. We have fairly slow moving assets in the form of rovers. Which particular science target to pick? Is there a good route around the corner? These are questions that come up and have come up. Getting down into the bottom of a crater, the MER rovers spend a lot of spent a lot of time looking around the crater edge, looking for a way down. So again, the sort of a scouting role, looking for things. And with an aerial vehicle, there are a lot of places you can get to, which your conventional lander or rover would have problems getting to. So these are all motivations for having an aerial dimension that basically bridges that gap. You have orbital stuff where you can see the entire planet. You have very high resolution stuff on the ground from rovers, something intermediate in both in terms of scale and also just in terms of access. So that's what the Mars helicopter is all about. And so scouting, where we can't go with anything. And so the question naturally comes about, if you wanted to build a helicopter on Mars, what does it take? I don't need to tell people here that Mars is a long distance away from Earth, even though in the evening skies it looks awfully close. And I'm sure everybody's seen it, right? This is all the Mars crowd. There's not a single person here who doesn't go out. It's near the moon right now. I think it's a beautiful view. So still, it's quite a few light minutes. So it's we do need to be autonomous, just because of the light times. The bigger challenge is that the atmosphere is only 1% of Earth. It's roughly the equivalent of flying at 100,000 feet here on Earth. And so obviously the solution is, when you have thin atmosphere, you compensate by having large, lightweight blades that spin very fast. That's fairly well understood. It's a low Reynolds number regime, but nevertheless, it's a very straightforward approach. It also gets very cold. We are a tech demonstrator, so size works against us. The volume to area ratios are such that staying warm in night is actually our main energy challenge, more than flying. And there's a combination of, thermal control where it's needed and other parts that can survive in the breeze overnight. And we need to have a power system and the solar power system with lithium-ion battery technology to give us the power when we actually do fly. So it's basically a harvesting vehicle. If this had been a green vehicle, Earth vehicle, I would have said it's a very green vehicle, but on Mars it's a very red vehicle, if you will, fully solar powered. So that's, conceptually the way to go. And there's a lot of engineering that's gone into trying to understand how to make such a vehicle happen. We are a tech demo as a very small payload with a certain limited extent of real estate on the 2020 rover. And so that constrains like a blade diameter to be a maximum of 1.2 meters in diameter. And so everything that we build, if you work out the numbers, has to be less than 2 kilograms. We also have to spin the blades pretty fast, so the range is a density dependent number, but it's anywhere from up to 2,800 RPM. And one of the things we deliberately wanted to do was not get into any high Mach number regimes at the tips of the blades. We didn't want to have the uncertainty of various transonic flows and issues that come up coming into play. So basically, we're keeping the tip Mach number below 0.7 to achieve that. So one fundamental question that always keeps coming up despite all this analysis is that, can we fly on Mars? Can we lift anything on Mars? It's sort of the number of skeptics there. So one of the things we did early in the program was to build a 1/3 scale model and put it in our 25-foot chamber and have somebody try to joystick it, just demonstrate the flight and be done with it. And you can see from this effort, there's a crash at the other point, that we found out that flying a vehicle like a helicopter in the thin air is a fundamentally different problem than what you have here on Earth. It turns out that on Earth, the thicker atmosphere provides aerodynamic damping, and there are all these flap frequency effects that get into the control bandwidth. And so we basically had to learn how to fly. Lift was pretty standard, but getting control flight, if you will, what we call our Wright brothers moment, where you have a cheap control flight, and that's really what made air travel possible here. So a lot of breakthrough work had to get done to say, can we fly, but in a controlled way? And so 2 years ago, we actually built a full-scale model where the blades are the correct diameter and they're the flight blades. This one is only 850 grams because it leaves the battery and the computer on the floor. But in our 25-foot chamber, evacuated to Mars conditions, at Mars densities, spinning up the blades, and you have the controlled flight. You can see that it's getting buffeted by the own winds that it creates in that confined chamber. So this vehicle is light enough to fly here on Earth, where gravity is higher. For the Mars vehicle, that's closer to 2 kilograms, we do is a gravity offload. But this was kind of the moment where they said, okay, you guys know how to fly on Mars, but guess what? You got to also build a spacecraft. It's not just an aircraft. It has to survive launch, the G-loads, the cruise through space. It has to have all the comm systems, energy systems, the CNDH, planetary protection, contamination control. There's a whole spacecraft-related effort that accompanies this. It's not just, a helicopter, if you will. So, in order to achieve that, we came up with the design. And so, let me walk you through the design. Does my mouse work? Anyway, let me start from the counterclockwise from the top left out here. So this is the vehicle. It's little less than 1.8 kilograms, and we achieved those constraints. Basically, what makes this system possible is a lot of the new technology in batteries and the electronics you have and your computer, things like cell phones and so forth. Very lightweight carbon composite blades. Each blade is about 28 grams. In order to sort of overcome some of the stability issues you saw, we actually had to make the blades quite stiff. That was one way of avoiding some of those instability issues. So very stiff blades at 28 grams. Landing legs also composites. We have a downward-looking camera for basically imaging velocimetry. We have a laser altimeter. We have MEMS inertial measurement units, 2 of them. So that's basically the sensor package that allows the vehicle to know how far it's flying and what velocity it's flying. There's an avionics processor, which is basically your cell phone type technology. And it's got also additional computing, like the door level controls are handled by some automotive control processors, which are very hardware redundant and hot swappable. And there's a radiation tolerant flight programmable gate array that keeps, system, the critical functions are implemented on that. The fuselage has an electronics core module in the middle, which you'll see in the next slide. And it has a thin wall outside with high absorption that allows us to basically harvest thermal energy during the day. So you don't need to run heaters during that time. And it also provides a carbon dioxide gas cap for a couple of centimeters. We looked at aerogel, but it turned out that for the price of a small energy penalty, the gas cap works almost as good and is lighter. The name of the game here was getting under those 2 kilograms. The masses were being managed at the gram and sub-gram level to get us there. We have a solar panel on the top, and it's a fixed solar panel. And the reason that works out quite well is that the way helicopters work is they basically suck in air from a big funnel and they push it through the blades. So most of the work the blades are doing are really out towards the tip. That's where they're spinning fast and generating the lift. The center region is actually pretty much a dead zone, and it's a good place to put stuff. So one of the other things that's out there is also a telecom antenna, so we can talk back to a relay box that's there on the rover. And running right from the top to the bottom is a central mast, which is a basic structural element. The rover also holds on to the helicopter by the 2 ends of the mast in a deployment system. As you can see, this is a coaxial configuration of the rotors. It's counter-rotating. You don't need a tail rotor. There's some efficiency reasons that this has a good advantage. So in the future, we might go to other configurations, but for this particular tech demo, we went to the coaxial configuration. So what it looks like with the fuselage skin taken off, this is an engineering development model that is essentially the same as the flight design. Flight design is ever so slightly different, just to take into account some design tweaks that we learned when we flew the system in the chamber. We also took a second version of this and put it through a vibration and thermal and aeroshock campaigns. And so that's, you can see here in the center that the electronics core module, which has the batteries all the way at the center, lithium-ion batteries, the warmest spot with heaters, and the boards basically wrap themselves around. That's about a 6 centimeter cube. And you can see the rest of the system. You can see the swash plates. These are the servos that control the swash plate. Identical to upper and lower rotors. We have some tracking Vicon balls on the top that we use in the chamber. So this is the system that got built. Big, long test program, almost as difficult as inventing the helicopter, if you will. And the spacecraft was to invent a test program that, so we knew it actually work. I've got a few clips from that, just showing you some examples. This is a 4-man's wind tunnel, where we have it on a swing arm to see what the effects of low-speed lateral flow are. We have since then installed an open section wind tunnel, generating 11 meters per second wind in a 25-foot chamber, working with some of our colleagues at Caltech. So we actually have essentially built our first low-speed, low-pressure wind tunnel that we can test the system on. This is one of the engineering models. Now, this is the full 2 kilogram system. We don't have the thermal insulation on here because we're testing at ambient. It would overheat. And there is a gravity offload feather on top, and which it wants to fight the vehicle and restore it, so the vehicle actually responds to the disturbance, but it can do things like climb, translate, slew maneuvers. Okay, a lot of simulation work using physics-based simulations, where, looking at basically a lot of Monte Carlo, make sure we are robust. So this is a little clip from, our high fidelity vehicle simulations. You can see it flying, and this is in Victoria Crater terrain. So the next stop is the Mars, and how do we get there? Thanks to the 2020 rover, we are stowaways at the bottom. There's a good spot there which presents the least risk for any landing damage when the rover lands. It's a very small chance that it might contact something. They will drive around for a bit and then find us a spot, and then there's a deployment system that's built to very exacting standards that will basically pivot and drop us on the surface, and then they unstraddle us and drive away to a safe distance. And at that point, we basically have a base station antenna and base station electronics, which basically serves as a relay. And from that point on, and even earlier in the cruise, we just look like another science instrument, because it doesn't know that there's a helicopter there. It just knows that there's something that you can retrieve data from and send commands to, and all the relay jobs are done by our base station. The notional mission is over the course of 30 sols on Mars. We would start out small. We would basically repeat the chamber flights, get up there, hover, come back. But then once we really get to understand how we're doing in the environment with the winds in the atmosphere, we'll take further and further out flights, looping back to our safe landing spot in the beginning. But if we have observed other landing spots, or the rover has seen other suitable landing spots along the way, we will sort of go and land there. Sort of over a maximum of 5 flights is planned, and during the 30 sols. And then we are done as a tech demonstration, and the 2020 mission goes about doing all the other wonderful stuff you heard about earlier. So, we have had landers. You can imagine landers with more complicated instruments. We are currently studying how the system scales up to the 5, 10, and even the 15 kilogram class helicopter, carrying, half kilogram to 1 kilogram of science. So you could have landers which work with those kinds of helicopters. You could have a scouting role with a smaller helicopter just looking ahead for a rover. You could have a fully independent science helicopters with direct comm to orbit. That's in the 5, 10, 15 kilogram class vehicles. And there are obviously lots of interesting missions you can think of. Here are a couple of examples. You can, they're small enough that you could have a number of them. They're small enough that you can get them nice and sterilized if need be, and send them off to places where you normally wouldn't be able to access things. We recently had a big working group of scientists getting together at JPL and what we call as an A-team study that identified a whole bunch of interesting missions and payloads that would be carried by larger helicopters in the future once this tech demo sort of paves the way. It's a very large team of people, both at JPL and AeroVironment in Simi Valley. They're the guys who build small drones and lightweight things. Ames folks, Rotorcraft Center there, and folks at Langley with some of the CFD work. With that, I'll take questions. Do I have the microphone?
How do you maintain directional control? How do you determine directional control?
Right. So the helicopter basically, by controlling the swash plates and modulating the pitch, basically provides attitude, pitching, rolling, and yawing capabilities. So you can hit the helicopter, and basically that gives you the translational motion. From a navigation perspective, all the sensors that I mentioned, the data is fused, and so there's always a current state estimate that's maintained by basically a Kalman filter. And so it always knows where it is, and you can command directional motions by pitching or tipping the helicopter.
What do you estimate the range and the recharge time?
Yeah, so for the landing, this has been, the solar system has been tailored for the landing site. And we estimate that under nominal atmospheric conditions, we should recharge in a day. The vehicle itself aerodynamically is capable of motion in the tens of meters per second. Our controls people are comfortable with an airspeed of up to about 10 meters per second. Because of our navigation camera and this field of view overlap issues, we are planning on going no more than 3 meters per second. The nominal flight duration for this tech demo is about 90 seconds. So it's at least, anywhere from, so this tech demo we probably won't go more than 300 meters in the course of a flight. But the vehicle itself could have gone in those 90 seconds, could have gone a kilometer or more.
Sir, I noticed that in the test chamber, the sound produced by the helicopter was quite audible. Was that in an oxygen environment or carbon dioxide environment?
Yeah, it wasn't a carbon dioxide environment at mass pressure, but what the microphone is actually on the floor of the chamber, but it's a 25 foot by 80 foot high chamber, and it works as an excellent sounding system. So actually, we were also slightly surprised by the sound, but it turns out that you pick up that sound when you're in that enclosed environment. It picks up the sound quite nicely when you're on a microphone attached to the metal floor on the chamber. I'm going by wherever the microphone is. I'm not calling out anybody. So
you had a slide mentioning bridging the gap, and the previous talk mentioned that there is no plan for a U.S. orbiter in the near future. So is there any plan on your end or in JPL's radar end to have some kind of either rotary or fixed wing asset with a telescope sizable enough to provide spatial resolution for manned operations in the near future?
No, right now the focus is on the tech demo, and the focus is in some of the near-term studies to look at what the payloads would be and some IR&D types of efforts to sort of mature the technology for scaled up versions of these things. In terms of the actual missions that would be proposed or relevant, that would go through the normal, process in either the Mars Directorate or the Human Exploration Directorate. And once the technology is available and is sort of there for the use. So we are more in the technology demonstration side with engagement with the science so that we don't do stupid things. But the actual future pathway of using something like this is all, comes later. It doesn't happen now.
Two quick questions. I do battle bots, so a question I have for you is, if this thing lands at an angle, can it hit the ground with the propellers to self-right?
We will be spinning the blades at least 2,400 RPM, so blade contact with the ground would be not good. It's designed to land on fairly slope terrains with about 5 to 10 degrees slope and rocks of a certain size for the tech demonstrator. And the landing site are picked so that they meet those criteria. So it's not going to try to land in places that are aggressive. And there's a good handoff between the guidance navigation control on board and the landing gear robustness, which play into what all terrain you can land safely on.
Wow, this is so exciting. Thank you for creating this amazing announcement. Two quick questions. Will there be a chance to capture video of the flights from the rover? And also, how soon can Mattel make our toy version? How soon can you have Mattel make our flying toy version for home use?
I don't have stock in Mattel, but anyway. Yes, so the rover will be about 100 plus meters away. So there is a plan for the first flight that they will image us from an engineering perspective, to see, because if something happens to a rover, we're a tech demo. Our risk posture is very different from, a flagship project. We also have a 13 megapixel color camera. Again, I point to all these technologies that are suitably enhanced for radiation and other things. But so we will be taking an image of the rover. So there is an opportunity for a mutual selfie. Yes.
Okay, last question.
To what elevation above or below datum would the helicopter work, or what percentage of the surface of Mars would this helicopter be usable? And second question is, was a balloon also considered for this mechanism?
Yeah, so our nominal flights for this tech demo are going to be at the 5-meter mark, because that's where we are very confident of the altimeter providing us very good return. The altimeter itself can go to about 50 to 100 meters nominally. And some of our earlier work has indicated that heights of 30 to 60 meters above the terrain are the best place to be from a visual imaging, geologically, scientifically interesting perspective. And then the second part of it.
Was a balloon also considered?
Yes, I was a lead for a balloon study many years ago. And I think the main advantage of something like this is that the degree of control you get over the platform to go precisely where you want to go, if you want to maintain a standoff, science imaging. So yes, balloons have also been considered in the past. And in fact, the French, I think, still have a balloon somewhere in a warehouse in France waiting to be launched in 1997, I think, or whenever it was supposed to go. So yeah, it's being considered, but the emphasis of this project was on the helicopter side. Okay, I think that was supposed to be the last question. So thank you all. It's similar when ground pressure to what you see with the bone. So you took some shots and navigation stuff. We have scenes in various places. It will interfere with about a meter from the ground in terms of navigation. Yeah, the navigation, and we have used navigation strategies that don't rely upon visual sensing. That combination is okay.
Okay, while we get the tech worked out here, I would like to say thanks for being a great audience. And I'm going to be introducing Dr. Joseph Kirschby. And he received his PhD from Princeton University and is the Nico and Marilyn Van Lingen Professor of Geobiology at Caltech. He originated the snowball Earth concept to explain weird features on Earth's oldest glaciations, discovered the tiny magnets that animals use for navigation, and has recognized several major shifts in Earth's spin axis that have driven biological evolution. And today his talk will be, could the terrestrial biosphere have started on the flanks of Tharsis? Welcome, Dr. Kirschby.
Are we up and running? Oh, great. Well, I'll start by asking Bob my question in the previous talk. The original Mars helicopter, Bob, where'd you go? Yeah. Oh, yeah. The original Mars helicopter idea, you were going to use the Samsung cell phone architecture of some sort.
Yes, well,
most drones on Earth use GPS navigation coupled with a magnetometer. Now, you don't have a GPS in Mars. Are you going to keep the magnetometer in work?
it's probably there, but I don't know what's on the chipset. So.
Please keep it.
We have very high powered magnets powering our rotors, which are just close proximity. So I don't know whether you're getting it.
Well, actually, we've checked some of those motors, and the flux on the rare earth magnets are so closely coupled, just a few centimeters away, you get a perfect signal. Mind you, we tried to get a magnetometer in March 2020, and on Curiosity failed in both runs, even though we had $3 million in action compartment system. That's an aside. But as you may gather, I am a magnetist. I study magnetism, I live and breathe it. I'm also a biologist. And as mentioned in the kind introduction, I am fascinated by small magnetic objects and things. One of my lab projects at the moment is unraveling the biophysics of the magnetic sense organs in animals, which actually I think may have evolved on Mars. Pretty sure. So we'll make that straight. So what I would like to focus on in the brief 25 minutes I have today is whether the terrestrial biosphere could have started on the planks of Tharsis. And this is kind of a nutty idea, but not so nutty when you think about it. The real title, an analysis of the electrochemical environment of early Martian high altitude glaciers during late Neogen time. And the reason this is important is that we know Mars has been throwing rocks at us for 4.5 million years. We have on the order of 200 Martian meteorites. Some of them, using magnetic studies as well as argon studies, we know got here in low temperature trajectories. They're not heated. So phrasing it in a little different way, Mars has been spitting at Earth for 4 billion years. It has implications for planetary protection as well. On the other hand, if you realize that, and you say, well, if Mars ever did evolve life somehow it had either gotten to Mars or evolved there, the natural transport mechanisms are there. Those Martian meteorites get to Earth without heating. And so the problem of the origin of life cannot be divorced from Mars. If it had evolved on Mars, it would be here, it would be us, and we might not know it. We probably wouldn't know it. So that actually makes an interesting prediction in terms of the environment of Mars. But when you step back from that a little bit more, and you say, well, compare Earth and Mars, which I'm going to be doing here very quickly, why might Mars have been a better place? And there's a very simple, I think, very powerful argument when you look at the early environment of Earth and Mars that argues Mars might have been a better place. And it comes down to electrochemistry. So very quickly, Earth and Mars, life is here now, no visible life on Mars. There's a deep gravity well on Earth. It makes it very difficult for meteorites to get ejected from Earth. We have tektites, they're molten materials. And we don't have any ammonites with fusion crusts when you're rejecting you came back. We have 200 odd Martian meteorites. It's easy to get off of Mars with an impact. We have a horrible rock record actually on Earth of the time where we think life evolved. It's been buried, it's been burned. And Mars, it's there, it's excellent. The time interval where we think life evolved somewhere is preserved in Mars. So here's really what I'm going to tell you. Electrochemically mean I'm wearing a biological hat as well as a geological hat. Was the original metabolism on Mars, not on Mars, but of life, sloppy or precise. And if you look at the scenarios for the original life, particularly where people think Mars may have, or life may have evolved in a weird, restricted, extreme environment, I raise my hand and say, if you look at what lives in those extreme environments on Earth, they didn't evolve there, they moved there. The way natural selection works for linear evolution, you take a sloppy system and you make it better. If you apply that reasoning to the fundamental metabolism that drives all life in all cells, you want an ancestor that starts in a very sloppy, energy-rich environment. So my focus on life, don't look at Europa, don't look at Enceladus. The electrochemistry there is minimal. Look for a place where we have wide chemical variability. And I found a place. It's on Mars. It's the Tharsis province. And in fact, looking at that environment 4 billion years ago, 4.5 billion years ago, solves a hell of a lot of the problems we have trying to figure out how life evolved. So I'm going to focus on Tharsis. I'm going to worry about ozone in the atmosphere. Very elegant studies by geochemical groups in San Diego. And then where it might be. So here we go. Bear with me. This is a science talk. So life is run by oxidation and reduction reactions. And if you can see my little pointer moving around here, if you have a half reaction here that dumps an electron this way, you gain energy. If you go the other way, you lose energy. So all metabolism on Earth drives this way. So when you look at those couple of reactions and look at the biochemistry, you find that there are electron transport processes that sit and dump electrons from highly reducing to highly oxidizing. And each little step generates enough energy for a molecule of ATP or so, or NADPH or something else. And it kind of works like this. The chemistry is fairly complex and highly evolved. We start with highly reduced, and then boom, you get down eventually to oxygen. That's this redox tower thing I showed. So here are the two kind of ideas. You go back to the classic biochemical ideas. People think, well, this probably evolved stepwise. Norm Horowitz at Caltech got this many years ago. And the idea is that you would have a little bit of energy from some redox jump. You could grab a little molecule of ATP, and as time moves on, you add a little thing to the end of that chain, and it goes on, and you end up with this highly complex biochemical pathway. Problem here, that little system has to be efficient at the start. If you're going to get, sulfate to sulfite electrochemical reaction, you need a very, very precise, highly evolved enzyme to do that. That's not going to be the way life could start. Evolution takes a sloppy system and makes it better. So what I would prefer is to find an environment somewhere in the solar system where you have large gradients, maybe going from oxygen to methane, huge chemical availability, and you have a sloppy system. But what evolution then will do is take gene systems, duplicate it, tailor it, tinker with it, and you can start extracting more and more energy. So you go from that to this to something like that, and then end up with that system. So, of course, the first time I see this, people think, oh, oxidizing conditions destroy food. prebiotic molecules. Why do you want the origin of life in a place where there's oxygen? Stanley Miller couldn't do it. Yeah, Harold Urey could not do that with lots of oxygen. But there's a way of doing this. As a geologist, you know that oxygen is sequestered, you get redox stratification. And you can get basins or puddles that interact with objects. So I'm going to go to Mars really quick. By the way, this is why I don't like the concept of life in extreme environments, as I said. They move there. If you do the genetics of something that hydrothermal vents or highly high thermal environments, those bugs move there. They didn't evolve there. Okay. Sorry, NASA, you're spending too much money on life in extreme. Anyway, that's not what can we find an early environment with large redox gradients? And I think there is one. Let's go to Mars. Here's a view of Olympus Mons. If we go back in time, well, just today, we know that there's an economy at Mars. The northern basins are very low. The southern highlands are very highly old. We know why it's there. Tharsis is the largest gravity anomaly in the solar system. It basically, when it erupted, the mantle of Mars had stopped convecting. It was solid, so the Tharsis province stays there, the huge gravity anomaly. And as you spin around, it has to go on and stay on the equator. And this is really unusual. The mantle of Mars stopped convecting before the volcanic pile accumulated. It holds up the weight, and it hasn't collapsed in 4.5 billion years. Tells you something. Tharsis volcanoes did not come from the mantle of Mars. They came from a heat source near the core mantle boundary. That's an important point. It means the volcanics equilibrated with nickel iron metal. The average elevation of Tharsis is also 28 kilometers above the base. That's another critical thing, because that's how you get the oxidants on Mars. Okay, so that's the background of Mars. Two very critical things. Geology and geochemistry, we've known since Mariner that there are valley networks, streams, things. If you go back about 20 years to a beautiful paper by Phillips, Marin Zuber, Solomon et al. In Science, they actually looked at the MOLA data, Mars altimeter data, and recognized that Mars, because it had solidified, Tharsis came out, it rolled to the equator, it warped Tharsis. But that warping, these valley networks drain downhill from the warp of Tharsis. It allows you to date the valley networks. And what it tells you, by the way, excuse my Japanese, I'm half-time in Japan. I can't. I have 2 sets of slides for everyone. But anyway. So anyway, during Noachian time, prior than about 3 million years ago, these valley networks are old. You can date them because of this warpage. But the amount, and that really constrains Tharsis to come out in a very short period of time. And if you worry about the volatiles that are released, you get something like 120 meters filling over the planet, or up to 1.5 kilometers of volatiles water on the North Polar basins. So the other thing, those gases that came out in that period of time were equilibrated with the deep Martian mantle. No plate tectonics on Mars after that point, maybe a little bit earlier. So that makes some very important geochemical arguments. First off, I won't go into it too much. We know that there is water. My colleague at Caltech, Bethany Allman, has done beautiful work showing that there's wet phase. It's been, we're doing completely reducing and oxidizing. We know, as Mike mentioned earlier, that there are beautiful evidence for flowing water, rounded stones from the Curiosity rover, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go into that. But what I want to do is that the Tharsis environment is precisely what Harold Urey and Stanley Miller worked on about in the early 1950s. It's a pity, as I'll get to, they did a lot of experiments with reducing gases and spark mixtures, and they could get all sorts of organic carbon compounds there. Nucleotides, amino acids, fatty acids. But then somebody told them, those are not gases that come out of volcanoes, the more oxidizing. When they tried those gases, it didn't work, and it kind of threw things for a knock. But if you go back and look at those geological oxygen buffers, and use a few terms here, this is now temperature versus log oxygen free gas. Basically, the equilibrium amount of oxygen. And when you go to geology and they say oxidizing, it doesn't mean oxygen, it means how many minus log units the oxygen is there, which is on this thing. So we have the iron leucite buffer, from native iron to iron oxide, phthalate, magnetite quartz, and then magnetite hematite there. I'm going to show you something interesting that came out of the Deep Carbon Observatory studies a few years ago. This beautiful paper by Wetzel et al. Turns out if you look at this oxygen fugacity, now this previous slide is here, oxygen fugacity, these buffers, they're shown on the horizontal line here, relative to the iron leucite. Earth's mantle is very oxidized. It turns out when you have pressure, the planet the size of Earth, the pressure deep in the core takes reducing materials and disproportionates it, makes it oxygen reducing. And so Earth's mantle is oxidized. The gases that come out of Earth's mantle are dominated by CO2. If you go to more reducing equilibrium environments, you start getting things like methane, ammonia, hydrogen, primary gases coming off. And so the Martian mantle actually measured from meteorites comes this way. The lunar mantle was more reducing and so forth. So the point I'm trying to make is the classic Miller-Urey reduced gas mixes would have come out from the Tharsis volcano. It had to, the way that forming the source. So Earth is up there. The moon forming event also sucked out a lot of the native iron and sucked it to the Earth's core. That didn't happen on Mars. So we go then to the prebiotic synthesis argument. Certainly the Urey Miller experiments were there. The gases coming out of Tharsis would have been dominated by methane into NH3 and some of the reducing materials. Very much so. They're on the summit of those volcanoes, very cold temperatures with huge lightnings. I mean, any volcanic eruption is accompanied by copious lightning, simply from triboelectric separation. So you've got a Urey Miller synthesis place. On top of that, remember my whole goal is to find places where we have redox chemistry. So what about the oxygen? I refer you to a beautiful paper by Jim Farquhar, Mark Demons, and Teresa Jackson back in 1998, about 20 years ago. Looking at the oxygen isotopes in the carbonates in this famous Martian meteorite, the LH8411, you can actually get a fingerprint of the oxygen going through ozone. There's a mass-independent fractionation of the oxygen isotopes, where oxygen 17 and 18 are fractionated differently with respect to oxygen 16. There's a fingerprint of going through ozone with the ultraviolet stage. A quarter of the oxygen atoms that are in those carbonates were up in the Martian atmosphere as ozone and circulated through. So there was an ozone layer on ancient Mars. Absolutely beautiful, stunning, because here we've got the volcano with reducing gases coming out, and yet they go into an atmosphere with ozone. So the question, can you mix those two? And it turns out if you look at Earth today, we can actually know where the ozone layer is and scale it. We can actually go back and change the scale height for ozone on Earth to match that of Mars. Here's Tharsis and Mars. Average elevation of the plateau, 28 kilometers above the base of the North Polar Ice. And the question is, where would the ozone layer have been on ancient Mars? And you can do a first order calculation on this. You compare the atmospheric scale heights, each of the height scale heights, and then you worry about the 1/e exponential decay of the height. And you scale that with the background Boltzmann constant temperatures. The critical numbers from Earth and Mars are like this. Molecular mass, atomic mass units for the atmosphere of Mars is higher, take more CO2. You want to then change this to the wake-in time, going back 4 billion years. You keep that CO2 needed for the greenhouse, at least the atomic mass units. You want to raise that temperature up to something where water could form, say 260. And then you do that scaling, and what you estimate is about 13 kilometers for the scale height of the atmosphere. We go back then to our Tharsis, put that scanlight on, and what you discovered is you get about 25, 26 kilometers. So you go back to Noachian Mars, put the atmosphere back in, you walk up into the ozone layer on Tharsis. It hits the ground. So you have these volcanic gases coming out from the eruptions, hitting ozone. So what does that mean for the ozone layer? I'm going to bring this in. We know that Tharsis had glaciers. They're actually Amazonian glaciations that are preserved on Mars. There's good evidence for Noachian glaciers on the flanks of Tharsis. So you've got a high volcano erupting volcanic gases. You have the lightning hitting the urinoid gases coming out of the volcano. What happens? It freezes over the surface. When the eruption stops, the ozone percolates it. My gosh, you've got a redox gradient that's unlike anything else we've ever seen really in the solar system. Maximum. So, and if you think about the stratigraphy of those glaciers, you can worry about top to bottom, the bottom, and you would get a stratigraphy. Say, you go on that, look at what you'd have prebiotic organic mush with volcanic ash, ice-rich water vapor just condensing, and you would build up a stratigraphy where the ice is trapped, maximum redox gradients. It flows down hills and will melt. So this is the only place in the solar system where I've seen maximum redox gradient present, predicted to be there. We don't know how long it will be there, but it's there. And so, bang, you go from highly reducing to highly oxidizing right in that thing. So, those glaciers are going to flow, they're going to go down. And what happens? What about actually producing the origin of life into environments? Now, every Precambrian geomicrobiochemist has their own favorite idea for the origin of life. But one of the things we know about the biosphere today is that it is based on nucleic acids, particularly ribose DNA and deoxyribose, ribose and RNA and deoxyribose and DNA. One of the worst problems in the origin of life has been getting ribose. Ribose is part of the backbone of DNA. You need to be able to get it somehow. And a couple of mechanisms that have been proposed. It's been difficult. Making these little sugars abiotically is not easy because they like to form tar, coal tar, basically. And it's just they like to polymerize. And there are two solutions that have been proposed to this. The better solution is, if you have an environment with lots of calcium borate, you can actually use it to generate these carbons. Sutherland had another solution by making two other molecules photochemically and splicing them together. These groups have been warring back and forth. Benner, for example, is concerned that Sutherland's solution doesn't work without graduate students somewhere. Back. We don't think there were graduate students on Mars. Anyway, that's about all the chemistry and all that. But the Benner model is nice because it does make a prediction about environments that are consistent with Mars. And basically the idea is that you need the calcium and the borates to stop the further reactions when you get to the stage in the reaction synthesis. And the calcium borate minerals like colemanite and malachite and a few other things are common in environmental things. And by the way, you also need a little bit of oxidized molybdenum to it, which would be present in things. But there's important things about these borate minerals. They mainly form in dry lake beds and deserts, and they dissolve easily in water. So you want an environment where you can get them down. Death Valley is a good one. The chains of craters that produce it. Mars is another good environment. Chains of craters where those go through. We actually landed the opportunity rover on environments. Unfortunately, you didn't have a way to measure boron, which is a pity. But that's an environment. So this is what Steve Benner accuses me of. Moving to Mars. And seriously, So how much time do I have? 2 minutes, but he's starting 10 minutes late.
And keep going.
Yeah, okay. No, so we know that life can move. Impacts on Mars will produce meteorites, splatter them in all directions. LH 8411, we know it came from Mars. It has the Martian atmosphere in it, and the atmospheric anomalies. We do have very interesting techniques to prove this. We did this about 20 years ago. We have a scanning magnetic microscope, which actually can go and resolve magnetic anomalies at a few micron levels. We use this with Ben Weiss and others, my former students now in the team, to show that this famous meteorite actually got to Earth without being heated into 40 Celsius. And I'll skip over to this one. Turns out, if you look at just the natural remnants, you can see magnetic anomalies, when heated, they go away even by 40 degrees Celsius. The rock has not been magnetized. And it went from Mars to Earth without being heated into 40 Celsius. So what I will do is then skip a little bit to say that there is one of the original arguments about this meteorite that still is viable. This is McKay et al.'s famous paper, launched the Astrobiology Institute, and also 2 things. Worm-like fossils were one of the ideas, 4 ideas, but the one that still is there is the magnetite in those carbonate blobs on this meteorite. Many of them, 10%, look like they are biological. And we've actually constrained in a new study that's just been done, that turns out we can test the origin of the magnetites, whether they're detrital or chemical. Detrital if it's biological, chemical if they're detrital. And the answer is actually complex. I'll summarize this by saying that we've shown that the magnetites themselves are detrital, but they had to form in a very strong magnetic field, almost like 10 times, 20 times stronger than the Earth's field. So it's very difficult to think about how to do that on Mars, but that is the solution that, and so just back in, anyway. I'll conclude by saying, I think we might be Tharsans, not just Martians, and maybe that's an example question. So to keep on time, even though I'm not sure. Take questions.
A little off your talk, but you're an expert in the effects of magnetism on that. So some of the ideas for protecting against galactic cosmic radiation are extremely strong many Tesla magnetic fields around the astronaut. What do you think about strong magnetic field affecting the health and nervous system, human biology?
I'm actually not free to discuss that.
That's a bummer.
We have manuscripts to review that, unfortunately, the editors do not speak about. No, but the thing is, you do want to put astronauts on Mars in a locality where you could use some of the local magnetic anomalies to reflect cosmic radiation. Unfortunately, all of our attempts to get magnetometers on the rovers have failed, damn it. Although InSight will finally have a magnetometer on the surface. And really, if you can put for 1 milligram magnetometer on your iPhone, most of the questions you can answer would be that. The data that we had from the ALH 8411 is now arguing that the magnetic field, when those carbonate blebs were formed, made those pin caps. You could do that on Mars conceivably. The distance from the core to the surface of Mars, about half of that on Earth. The field drops of 1 over r cubed, you get a factor of 8 to 10 difference. Not inconceivable, even though my colleague Stephen some cringes when they ask him about that. I think a proper magnetic survey would help locate future habitable sites. We want to do it in a place where the intrinsic magnetic anomalies of the Martian surface would be flat. And I will say that I think you do not want humans to spend 2 years in space without a biomagnetic field comparable to what we have.
Doctor, this is strictly a speculative, personal opinion question. How far along did life advance on Mars? We know we found perhaps little simple single-cell organisms. How far along do you speculate that life developed on Mars?
My friend Norm Sleep once suggested that eukaryotes evolved on Mars. Right? My gut feeling is that if you look at the history of life on Earth, it has been limited by the oxygen concentrations. Early Earth, we know, was less than 1 part per billion oxygen. We have detrital grains of pyrite and uraninite that survived the entire rock cycle, from erosion of the mountains to the distal toe of the marine pan. 10 micron sized grains would be gone if there was a part per billion of oxygen in that environment. You can't get higher life without oxygen. The metabolic energy is not there. On Mars, we have the reducing materials. We had oxygen produced photochemically, ozone in the atmosphere. I was joking when we started putting liners down. Look for clam shells. We don't know how fast life can evolve on Mars. But I mean, certainly I would not be surprised to see stromatolites, algomatic structures. But we really, Earth seems to have choked and slowed down the evolution of life. The planet, which has the natural geochemical gradients that are much faster.
Another question?
I was noticing the structure of hemoglobin and chlorophyll are remarkably similar, only one has magnesium and one has iron. And both of those are derived, from magnesium, iron type of silicates. Could you comment on that, suggesting the ubiquitousness of life?
The heme biochemical synthetic pathway is fundamental to both the hemoglobin and the chlorophyll molecules. In fact, there's an anaerobic version of the heme synthesis, which is the same in anaerobic and aerobic organisms, and feeds into both heme and chlorophyll. There are several minor substitutions that have been seen in the aerobic version of that synthetic pathway. But no, there's clear biochemical similarity between those. What was the point of your question?
The question suggests that since magnesium silicates are a very common thing out in the universe, I mean, we see lanes of dust everywhere in the galaxy, it suggests that magnesium and iron complexes could serve as the basis for forming these two very important molecules, and suggests, of course, the ubiquitousness of Earth-type life. That Earth-type life is a misnomer.
I would love to see hemoglobin in Mars.
You will. You will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kirschman. And I think it's pretty safe to say that we're all in support and rooting for you to get a magnetometer on Mars. I'm very pleased to announce our next event. So we're going to have a STEM education panel, and our education director, Nicole Willett, if the speaker, the panel's presenters would please come to the stage. And I will allow Nicole to do the instructions of her panel speakers today. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to start by saying, thank you again to my panel members for agreeing to be here to speak on, the subject of STEM education. Without STEM education, none of us would be here, because there would be no space program or hopes and dreams to go to Mars. So this is incredibly important for the future of humanity. I am, as Lucinda said, the Director of Education. I'm also a secondary science educator and adjunct professor of astronomy at San Francisco State. So I'm going to read a short bio for each speaker, and then they will have some words, and then we'll have a question and answer. Okay? First up, we have Carrie Krupel. She is the founder of Raw Science. She grew up in Dyer, Indiana. She has a degree in bioengineering from Purdue University and worked for 15 years in medical device development. Carrie won an entrepreneurial pitch competition through Caltech, Ideal Lab, and Art Center College of Design to create Raw Science TV. An advocate at the crossroads of the arts and sciences, the Raw Science Foundation is partnered with Digital Citizen Fund and the Afghan Ministry of Finance to create a STEAM, which is Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics high school in Kabul, geared towards providing students with critical technical skills and exposure to emerging technologies and AI. The team plans to create a university model after MIT in the US. A Mars analog is being created in Afghanistan for students to test their creations. Thank you, Carrie. Jody Monchesso was born and raised in South Dakota. Jody and her husband moved to Pasadena in 2007, where she taught middle and high school science at Blair High School until 2012. Recognized for her work in the classroom, Jody became the K-12 STEM specialist in 2012, leading the Pasadena Unified School District through the transition and implementation of the next generation science standards. She also consults for the National Institute of STEM Education as a coach for teachers and campuses that want to become nationally STEM certified. And Dan Lackus is the vice principal and founding teacher at Ad Astra School on the campus of SpaceX. Originally from Northwest Ohio, he holds a finance degree from Miami University and a master's degree in economics from UC San Diego. Prior to Ad Astra, Dan was a finance and accounting consultant with Protiviti in Cleveland, Ohio, and has been in his current role for the past 4 years with the administration of Ad Astra while teaching math, quantitative reasoning, robotics, and fabrication. So welcome, panel members, and if you would like to start with an opening statement, we'll start here with Karen.
I would like to describe the project that we're working on with Digital Citizen Fund a little bit. The Afghan Girls Robot Team, some people might have heard of, they traveled last July to the United States for the first time to compete in a FIRST robotics competition. It's a group of around 12 young ladies between 14 and 17 that are from Herat, Afghanistan. These young women have a plan to build the first school for science and engineering in Afghanistan based on the modeling of MIT. MIT Solve and Ada AI are some of their partners. And they feel that the way that their country will transform is by empowering young girls and women and youth to learn science and engineering so that the ever-growing gap in our culture between those who know and don't know, or who have access and don't have access, close for them. These young ladies also believe that that will change their country from, as they say, a bomb-throwing country to one of high technology. So we are officially partnered with them to help them grow this school, as well as create an amazing robotics design competition, inspired by the work they've done with FIRST Robotics, and an upcoming TED-like conference in their country. advisors to the school include Anita Sanduka, who was the manager of the entry descent landing for the Mars rovers, as well as Nadine Cox, who's the technical lead on the Mars rovers program. And then in short, to close that little description, these young ladies, we're often asked, are there differences in education and reasoning and, you know, the way young students work in Afghanistan? There certainly is no, you know, cognitive difference, of course, between students there and here, but it's very much like a young Martian crowd, because they have similar thought patterns in terms of long-term thinking across decades, with the knowledge of high risk.
Thank you. Jody?
All right, so a little bit about the work I'm doing. I was fortunate to join the district office right as the new standards were adopted, and we were going from a system of accountability that focused on math and ELA and very little on science. And so I annoyingly became the voice for STEM education in our district. My colleagues would say it's annoying. I like to say persistent. But trying to make sure that science education started as early as kindergarten and continued up through 12th grade. And so at various levels, I support teachers and administrators in being able to go into a classroom and seeing what should, and being able to identify what students should be engaging in the classroom, that there's hands-on, that kids are asking questions, that kids are going through critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, all those skills they need for a STEM career later in life. And we find through research, we often lose girls and minorities between that 8th and 9th grade year. So we're also focusing on providing opportunities to bring their community into their classroom and make those connections. So I fostered a lot of partnerships with Carnegie Observatories. And once a year, we go up to Mount Wilson with some high schoolers, and they get to look through the 60-inch and the 100-inch telescope. And they've often said that's an experience that was once in a lifetime, and it kind of had them think about, okay, maybe this is something I want to pursue and look into. We also have connections with Caltech and JPL to bring students and scientists into the classroom together so that students can see what it is they can do with their education. We focus a lot on project-based learning. We feel that that's an important way to get our students engaged. Pasadena Unified, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but we do not represent the community we live in. We have 63 private schools in our district boundaries, and 55% of our students choose to go to those private schools. And so most of our students in our schools are high minority, low socioeconomic status students who often do not leave a 3-block radius of their house. So the teachers and myself and our administrators, we really look at how can we provide opportunities to students they normally would not get. In my role with the National Institute for STEM Education, I also work with campuses and teachers who want to become nationally STEM certified, and we focus on research-based practices that they can use in their classroom to encourage kids in STEM.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah. So I think I'll start with just what my role is at Astor School, and then kind of how our school is formed. So I'm the vice principal and founding teacher at the school. So been there since the start, and I teach math, I teach quantitative reasoning, and I teach our fabrication class, as well as doing some of the admin work around the school. Our school now has 47 kids. We're pretty small, ages 7 to 14, and we're located on SpaceX's campus. We're entering our 5th year, and I think the core part of our school is based around problem solving and critical thinking. And we brought that into the classes, every class, but also created 2 dedicated classes, one on qualitative and one on qualitative reasoning, where we bring problem solving to the kids in a way that's meaningful and relevant. So that's the core kind of our school to push those into every single class. We've got the traditional classes, math, science, English, but then these added classes where I think we design these really cool simulations and puzzles for the kids to work through. The last thing is that we always talk about we redesign the school every year, and every year it starts with creating a school kids love, a place they love to be. We think that that's going to be the environment, a place that they want to be, feel supported, is going to be the place where they learn the most or inspired the most to solve the problems that are coming up in the future.
Okay, thank you. And Dan, luckily I was able to visit the Astor School, which was wonderful earlier this year. And I'd like you to describe a little to the audience the day-to-day workings and how that school is different because it's very different from any other school I've ever visited.
Yeah, so every year the school changes. What it looked like the first year, we started in a conference room at SpaceX. We had 8 kids, a small conference room, and then a side conference room that we started the school out of. We moved to a second location, and now we're on campus, on the west campus of SpaceX. So the day, I think some things would look really familiar and other things would look completely foreign. We've got kids, 7-year-olds that are managing their own schedule, right? We have a central area where the kids kind of do collaborative work, and then they go off to their English, science, and math classes. And I think those would look similar to a lot of classes that you've probably seen. Where we differ a lot is towards the end of the week, we get less structured. Kids get time to explore their passions. We have a big, heavy fabrication portion, and then we've got these quantitative and qualitative reasoning classes that the kids go into and work in teams a lot. I think the projects are really, they're complex, and we add little pieces each week so that it's not the kids getting this whole big complex simulation at once. But like an example of something we would do is we want to get the kids just thinking through seemingly equivalent answers to problems and going into anything that we can find conflict. So the easiest example I found is that if we look at a teacher, a firefighter, police officer, doctor, and a soldier, assign them values 1 to 5 on who should get paid the most to the least. So we would ask, thank you. We would ask the kids to do that, and there's not a right answer to it, right? You could rank mayor first, soldier first, but what we want to do is have the kids make those choices and then go through their decision-making process and explain to us how they did it. If a kid says the mayor should get paid or the soldier should get paid the most because that's what their parents do, there's another student who says, and that's great, but there's a reason you could say like the soldier should get paid the most because they risk their lives. So we kind of give these kids these questions where we push them towards thinking through the problems and then creating some form of logic to solve an ambiguous problem with seemingly equivalent options. So we do that across subjects, and we do that implicitly in multiple classes.
Okay, awesome. Carrie, can you walk me through a typical day with the Afghani girls and the projects you guys work on? Like you're there, walk me through the day.
Well, we're just starting our project, so we don't have a typical day yet, but we do a lot of communication remotely because the girls are now back in Afghanistan, although I think they were just traveling to Mexico City and competing in a first robot competition this last week again as well. So they're a busy bunch. So right now we're in the planning stages, but as far as I understand, they have fairly typical days in Herat. There's a school right now that ABC recently just covered where on a news program where they have 400 young ladies studying science and engineering in school, and it's fairly well secured in their area. And that's a typical day of life for them right now. But what we plan to do is help build a Mars analog where they can test their rovers, and the girls actually want to design cars and build them using parts sourced from different areas of the world and test them on the analog. So that will be a typical day.
Are the cars electric? Are they gas powered?
They would be electric.
Okay, excellent. And Jerry, with the Pasadena Unified School District, what are the challenges with STEM education when you have to stick to such a strict state curriculum?
The struggles are finding the time. We're fortunate about 20 years ago, Dr. Jerry Pine from Caltech wrote a grant, and we got a lot of materials out of that and a lot of training. So we have teachers who have the knowledge they need to teach science, but then in 1997, the state adopted the old California state standards, which kind of killed all creativity in our students. And the nice thing about the Common Core and the Next Generation Science Standards, it's bringing that creativity out. So now it's letting teachers know that you do have the time and space to go deep into the content that students need, that students can engage in long-term projects. And it's just kind of changing the mindset of where we've been, that we have to follow this standardized test because that test is not standardized anymore. And now it's assessing what students really know. So let's get into it. Let's have fun. Let's integrate science into our ELA time. So that later in the day they have more time for hands-on. So it's really that time is the biggest constraint, and how do you teach all of this in one day? And so I've been really working with teachers on integrating them and breaking those barriers between different content areas. So they're no longer taught in silos, but we're making connections and realizing that what we're learning in math applies to science, and what we're learning in science applies to history and other content areas.
Excellent. And Dan, what project do your students, I know you have various grade levels, what project seems to be the one they get the most excited about, something that really stands out?
Yeah, so we have we group kids by ability and interest as opposed to age, is one thing, but I'd say that the classes that they get the most excited about are our quantitative reasoning and our qualitative reasoning class. We call them synthesis and GPS. And the reason we know they're interested in it is because their parents are always telling us, they come home and they're talking about these projects, and over lunch, when they're outside, the kids are just talking about how they can solve these different problems. So we try to make these problems super, super relevant to the kids. I do most of the quantitative stuff. Josh, who's the head of school, he runs synthesis, and his projects are just amazing. They're these simulations that are completely built out. An example would be, so the kids are in different groups, and they're trying to make an art installation, and then is kind of the high level. But how that works is there's a set of paintings that there's an auction for. So the kids have to strategize which paintings they're going to go for. They all have the same budget, which paintings they're going to go for, how much they're going to go in for the auction for to gain their different paintings. Then they have to plan where they're going to go for the paintings. Each painting has a different demand curve in a different city. And so they have to strategize where they're going to go for the different cities, do the calculations for how much money they would get. And then there's a big game theory piece, because if two art installations from two different groups went to the same city, they would split the amount of money that would come. And then there's a lot of iteration through that. And then the complexity is added each week. And then at the end, we have the kids write up a report that we share with experts in the field, or kind of experts. For that one, we had a friend who works at Shedd Aquarium, and we used them as an art expert, but I think it works. So and she reviewed all of their strategy for how they acquired their paintings, why they chose these different cities. And you see the kids just running around talking with each other, like trying to be like, are you going to go to Shanghai? Are you going to go to Shanghai? And then they're like, I'm not going to tell you, because there's this whole game theory piece of it. And then they end up sharing a little bit, but the personal interactions with each other, with the kids, and then the relationship between the amount of work that they do to, they can, if they come up with a really cohesive strategy of which paintings go well in Shanghai, and then they plan around getting there and taking advantage of that, they can do really, really well. So the kids find this depth of the project where we kind of give them a play space, and then they can make any decision they want. They love those kinds of projects. And it's another one where we know they're talking about it at lunch. They go home, their parents come and talk to us about, like, the day they want to pick up their kids. They're like, did the kid get that painting by Frida Kahlo? And the parents are talking to us about it as well. So I think those sorts of projects just have so much layered on them. The human the interaction between the kids, within the team, across teams, the game theory, the analysis of figuring out numbers wise which paintings are the best. And then we layer on top of it like these cultural things, right? We used well-known paintings, so that even that piece of the project, they're gaining this bit of knowledge that's going to help them later. So I think those sorts of projects are the ones that the kids get the most excited about.
Do you have a printed curriculum, to collaborate with other educators?
So we're working on it. We make the school new every year, which is pretty tough to design like these brand new projects all the time. It's a thought intensive project to create a game that's balanced for the kids. If there's a weakness in it, they find it pretty quickly and they'll optimize against it. And that's kind of what we want them to do. So we want to give them, like I said earlier, seemingly equivalent options, right? And when we give them the playing board with the auction and then the strategy of which cities to visit and all of that, we don't want to jump in and then, tweak things from the outside. We want them to start at the beginning and just let the game play out. We don't have it written down yet. We're working on how to open source some of the curriculum we've created. We've been working on it for a long time, but to get it to a point where we feel really comfortable sharing it and just letting it go, we're not quite there yet, but we're getting closer.
Okay, I'd love to work with you on modeling that.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Carrie, have you done a lot of collaboration with other educators in the U.S. or in other parts of the world?
Yeah, we have a foundation that is small but dedicated to doing these sorts of things. And so we've worked with educators and students. I traveled for a month to Enugu, Nigeria, which was extremely interesting because the students, we were putting in solar panels for their school in an area where there is not consistent power. And students have access to mobile phones, but not consistent energy. And it was really kind of extraordinary working with them and the local educators just to even learn the context. For example, like what does it mean when you're transitioning from oil to solar energy? And what, we would even go and like look through the regulations at the local government level and the national government level about the energy pricing versus a hospital versus a school, just so they could really understand the full context and be engineering partners in what they were doing. I have not personally been, but I've sponsored students in our design teams. We often work with Purdue University where I went to school. Just this last May, we had a group of students internationally collaborating in Dehradun, India, with Purdue in Indiana, where the students from Dehradun are actually living in an orphanage, and they come from an area, one of the most remote areas on Earth called the Upper Delpo in the Himalayas, and the young girls there are basically rescued from what would be a life of sex trafficking. They're either very poor or in some cases have physical disabilities, and they're brought to this orphanage called GIFT that Lama Tenzin Chogyal started, and they learn science and engineering and law. And we've helped design across the world with them different solutions to bring back to their home, where maybe they weren't valued previously, but then they're able to design things that impact positively their community. So we built, for example, a rooftop solar heat collector that heats homes in the winter so they don't have to burn wood, and we've tested it to heat about 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Excellent.
Long answer.
It's fine, that's what we're here for. I love it. Jody, how do you view the role of project-based activities in STEM as far as moving kids towards Mars exploration or human settlement on Mars in your school district? Is that happening? Is it being taught in any way, or even parts of it?
Yes, so we have two Washingtons in our district. We have Washington Elementary, Washington Middle, and they're both, Washington Elementary is a STEM identified campus. They received a magnet grant to become a STEM campus, and then their feeder middle school is also they're a STEAM campus. And so we have a K-8 continuum there, and then John Muir High School has an engineering and environmental science academy. So we have a K-12 continuum of STEM in one area of our city. In elementary school, students actually build their own computer for virtual reality. And they do this in the beginning of the year when they start learning about space and the universe, and so that they can actually engage in virtual reality throughout the planets and learn about how our space system and our universe is built and all the pieces of that. And then in 8th grade, they have to do a defense project and they have to inhabit another planet. I'm trying to remember the driving question, but it's all project-based learning. And so they have to look at what does it take to civilize another area. They have to look at the composition of where they want to go, and they get to choose. So I got to listen to some of the projects last year. A lot of them went to Jupiter's moons. And we talked about okay, so what's the composition of the moon? What materials do you need to build a civilization? How are you going to handle the lack of oxygen? What about food? What about getting there? They had to look at all these different pieces and then in front of a panel defend their project as part of their 8th grade year. And that's part of how they essentially graduate from 8th grade to high school. They have to defend their project successfully. Their project doesn't have to be necessarily 100% correct, but they have to be able to explain why they chose what they chose, the scale drawings, they have 3D models, it's all the aspects of what you would want in a good STEM project-based learning. And so those are our two schools. We do emphasize project-based learning in all of our grades, in all of our campuses. And so you might go on, last year I was with some principals and we went into a classroom and they were trying to build sturdy structures that would withstand an earthquake. We really want to make it relevant to California students. So we stay away from topics like snow. When we talk about natural hazards, snow, I understand snow. I grew up in South Dakota. I know what snow is, but My fourth grader does not so much. He knows it's cold because he spent 5 minutes in it when we went home to visit my mom once. So we really want to make it relevant to them in their lives. And those are the kinds of projects that we try to create and encourage students to go through. And that sturdy structures were actually second graders. So they were given materials and told to build a structure that would withstand an earthquake. And then they got into this, these are the elements of an earthquake, this is what we're talking about, and then they rebuilt.
Excellent. And Dan, can you describe, you talked before about your GridFin project and your collaboration with SpaceX on the grid. Can you give more of an overview of that?
Yeah, for sure. One thing that's funny that Jody was saying too is that in one of our admissions projects that we did that firefighter, police officer, teacher thing that I told you, ranking those 5. And in the discussion, I was asking about whether it mattered if the firefighter was in California or Maine. And the kid was like, yeah, because Maine doesn't get fires, which was a really an interesting response to it. But it's like the fact the kid actually brought up the fact that geography would matter on how we would pay these people. They're like, well, it would matter if they were in California or Maine because Maine doesn't have fires. And I was like, not necessarily true, but like really good thought to think about how geography would influence that sort of thing. So the GridFin project was actually a collaboration between our school, SpaceX, and Hawthorne Math and Sciences Academy. So what we did is we want to, as a school, we want to get out in the community more. It's really beneficial for our kids just to get out and experience the local community. And I think bringing it in other kids and bringing in SpaceX, just the more views we can get in front of the kids, the more expertise, the better. So what we did was did a brainstorming activity to come up with what sort of project we could do with this local high school. And what we decided on was the grid fins. They're the things on the sides of the rockets that help it land. So they look like little fans. There's 4 of them on the first stage of the Falcon 9 that comes down, and they help steer it to the drone ships. So what I did is I went and talked to SpaceX engineers and just got kind of their process. How did they design this shape? How did they design the materials? How did they design the functionality of it? And then had to change it a little bit so that we could make a project for the kids that was absorbable. What we ended up doing was what's super important with these like building projects is giving the kids a way to get immediate feedback on whether their project is good or not, or whether it's effective in accomplishing the goal. So we had to design kind of a measurement mechanism to tell whether these grid fins are good. And from the meetings with the SpaceX folks, we decided that the grid fins should have, I may mess this up, but very low drag. So when they were horizontal, the grid fins, we wanted them not to catch a ton of air. And then when turned 35, 45 degrees, we wanted them to catch a ton of air. So we designed a little mechanism that used a scale, an air compressor on the top, made the whole thing out of PVC. And then what we did is we had the kids build them out of cardboard, attach it to this mechanism, and they would measure how many pounds of pressure went on the scale when it was pushed flat. And then we would rotate it and how much air caught when it was rotated 50 degrees. We wanted that difference to be as big as possible. So that measurement, all the kids could handle. 7 to 14, look at it flat, get the number, rotate it, get the number, subtract the 2. You want the biggest score. And that's a super important piece to any of these building projects that we do, because the kids then can look at it, make an adjustment, check the measurement again. Did it improve? Did it not? And they can just iterate super quickly. And for the kids, that ends up being a really valuable piece to it. We do those sort of collaborations with the local community a couple times a year. This one was really great. Went over a couple weeks, and the kids had a blast. Given, we use cardboard instead of aluminum or titanium or whatever they're using on the rockets. But the idea was great. We had SpaceX come over. A couple of engineers came over to kind of talk through the physics of it, much better than I could. And then, so that's kind of the project. I think really, really great, and a lot of different pieces where the kids, they learn through the experimentation of it, what sorts of designs will work best.
Okay, that sounds amazing. And so now we are back to Carrie. Can you talk about your work with the girls robotics team and how that is impacting their future STEM careers that they may go into?
Well, first I'd like to give all the credit to that team and the girls and Roya, my girl, who runs and advises them, because they're like truly incredible. The things that they envision and execute and bring to life are so life-changing for them, but really world-changing. And just as an example, the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, in this month of August, President Ghani in Afghanistan, allocated them land to build their schools, not just in Kabul, but in many provinces throughout Afghanistan, as well as funding for them to build them. So the project that they're working on are really, they're not only changing their future career paths in STEM, but they're providing a path for, thousands of youth coming behind them. So it's like hard to really describe just in terms of how it impacts their own life, but it will impact many.
And the ramifications otherwise are immense.
And then once they start with the school and the design competition, the design competition has multiple elements to it. It includes designing a car, designing functional robots, and we're also designing jewelry for the winners. And once that design competition is launched in Afghanistan, they're going to bring it to neighboring countries and then global. So they have large agendas.
Good. And Jody, this is gonna sound like a miracle question.
Okay.
If you had limitless funding.
Oh. Just funding, what's that like?
And more time in a day, how will your STEM projects in the school district change? What can you just, fantasize for a minute? What could you implement if you could have more funding?
Yes.
Or any funding? And time.
Well, if it was up to me, everyone would teach science 6 hours a day.
Yes.
Right? That's all we need. I've actually said that. They laughed at me, but I've said it.
You can learn everything through science.
There is, and there's actually, I found on Twitter recently an article that talked about science being the best subject you could teach to elementary students because it does involve that creativity and critical thinking. And I see it, I'm a parent of the district, and which can be hard sometimes. And my son this year in 4th grade has a teacher who loves science and who's comfortable teaching science. And we're in day 8 and he is coming home more excited about school than he ever has, which makes me excited because he wants to be there. She has animals, they do fun things. He comes home talking about the elements they learned, and they just started school last Monday. So if I had all the time, all the funding, and a clone, I'm still trying to figure out how to clone myself, being the only support for the district. I would, so we have a couple of our schools that have a model where they have a science lab teacher who teaches science to the kids all day. So if I don't get just teach science all day, then I would I would go to that model, because what happens then is the students rotate through that science lab. There's a person who can focus on only teaching science to the students. They themselves love science, and that enthusiasm comes through. So I would actually place a science lab teacher at all of our elementary schools, which would be 18. And just give kids more time during the day to engage in science. Because there's a lot of research that while we might spend multiple hours a week teaching math and ELA, we often spend 45 minutes to an hour a week teaching science in our early grades. And so then by the time the kids get to middle and high school, they're already turned off by science because it's not fun, or they spend it all reading and writing because that's what our emphasis is on. So I would make sure that every school had a lab, they had all the materials they needed, and the teachers were well trained to teach students how to do science and how to engage in the processes that scientists use each and every day.
Sounds wonderful.
And lots of collaboration with everybody. If only.
And for Dan, what type of projects does Ad Astra, to the stars, work on that can specifically get the students prepared for being spacefaring?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. We've got a science, we've got a brilliant science teacher, Dr. Rose. She does chemistry at the school, and what we've done is we've decided to kind of, instead of doing this survey of sciences, let her do what she loves, which is chemistry. And so the kids get chemistry 1 and then chemistry 2, and so the kids are actually getting this in-depth knowledge of chemistry. I think that hard science is super important, just like Jody was saying, and I think. So if we look at like what would benefit them, like Mars and
So what projects are you working on that gear them towards?
Yeah, that sort of future.
Being a Martian.
Cool. I think it's important. Yeah, we look at what would be important for a Martian survival, resourcefulness, critical thinking, problem solving, engineering, basically STEM background. So I think if we go from that standpoint, I don't think we teach survival, but I think we teach resourcefulness, critical thinking, problem solving, and those through our GPS class, which is a quantitative reasoning class I do, and then the synthesis class, which Josh does. We actually have a lot, maybe not surprising, that are geared towards space, given where we're at. We had a project where we laid out all these portfolios of different potential commanders for the first Mars mission, and they had how they rated themselves across different criteria of intelligence, fitness, like socially, how they get along well with others, leadership, those sorts of things, how they rate themselves, and then how they were ranked by others, age, all these different things, where they're from, nationality, education, all of that. And then we had the kids kind of select which of those would be the best commander for a Mars mission, and then which of the remaining group would fill out the first Mars mission. So we have the kids go through these kind of processes, again, with seemingly equivalent options. We have to make the different candidates balanced so that it's not clearly this first person, but so we do those sorts of things. And then also within our design thinking fabrication classes, I think a skill that's really important for the kids is a lot of times they'll come up with, say we're doing some sort of house building, right? Or just building something that needs a roof. And they're like, I need a big wooden plank that's like this big to put on as the roof. And what we try to push the kids towards is you don't need a big wooden plank. You need a thing that is not permeable by water that can cover the whole roof. It's not necessarily this wooden thing. So getting them to think about it, and can you create that, right? It's not that I need this certain thing. I need a thing that does this, and then I can either construct it or go find it and be resourceful about it. So I think those problem solving, critical thinking, resourcefulness, and then the general STEM knowledge that would be necessary to fix an oxygen regulator or something like that. I think those are all super important, and I think we get good coverage on them, at least at the level for 7 to 14-year-olds.
Yeah. Good. And for Jody, what would you recommend? There's a big difference between students in the cities and California versus someone in Nebraska. How do you think we could help the more rural teachers across the nation understand the importance of science and that it's a fact, first of all? I'm a little passionate about that. And teaching it as a fact. And I see I have some audience members that agree that's an issue. There's just a major difference between the cities where the teachers are teaching science as a fact and the more rural areas. How do you feel like we can help these teachers understand how important that is to convey to the students? Because our future is really depending on that.
So I know there are pockets of the area of the United States where I'm gonna use Texas as an example.
Okay.
Of not teaching evolution, even though it's a scientific theory. So I'm a biologist, so I had to teach. I didn't have to. I got the pleasure of teaching evolution to my students in 7th grade and 9th grade. And even here in California, there's some scientific theories and there's some science that, like climate change, it's not real. It's just, something people made up. And I think that's where data and evidence comes in is important. And working with adults, changing beliefs is one of the hardest things you can do, and something that I work on doing year after year. And so it's kind of a tricky question to answer, because you're essentially changing someone's belief, and they probably have that belief because someone a mentor of theirs or someone they respect had that same belief and passed it down to them. And we do have our parents also have an effect on what our students think. But all we can do is give them the evidence that we have for these things to show them that we're not making this up. It really is happening. It is an issue, and it's one we need to solve. So let's think about, if this is an issue, how would you go about solving it? One nice thing about I grew up in South Dakota, so I'm kind of biased towards those rural areas. One thing I miss living in Los Angeles are the stars. there's very little out here. But when I go home and go outside, and I grew up camping, fishing on the lake with parents who appreciated nature, which is probably why I went down the biology route. Dad who would feed spiders and have me watch, throwing crickets and webs, that kind of thing. But every night I would just lay under the stars and see the constellations and the formations and the Milky Way. And I miss that. And I miss that. I'm sorry, my children don't get to experience that. We try to drive and give them that experience, but they don't. So I think the more we can get kids outside, seeing the world around them and asking questions and engaging them in what is naturally a phenomenal piece of land and earth, this earth we live on, that can start getting them asking questions. And when they start asking questions, they want answers, and they will do anything to get answers, and they will start searching themselves. And then that starts to kind of go against what they thought was always true. And that's how we start changing misconceptions and beliefs.
Thank you. And for Carrie, can you describe a little bit more about Raw Science TV and what you're doing with that project?
Sure. So it started about 5 years ago. I won a pitch competition at Caltech and Idea Lab through the Design Accelerator to start an online network for science. And we really see it. I mean, it's obvious there's a gap in our culture for science and education. And one of the problems is what we celebrate in popular media. So one of our goals is to kind of disrupt the Hollywood Awards system. And we have an annual festival called the Raw Science Film Festival that this January will be at Paramount Studios. It's our 5th one, and after that year, we're eligible to be qualifiers for the Academy Awards. And we were invited in 2020 to host the festival at the Academy Awards. And our long-term goal within the next 3 years is to get broadcast like the Academy Awards, so that, and this year the Hollywood Reporter is coming. And so instead of celebrating the usual in the Hollywood Reporter for little kids, they'll be celebrating Kip Thorne and Stephen Wolfram and documentaries and fictional films about science and technology. So that's kind of the idea behind it, essentially.
Wow, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing that come to pass. And so we have about 10 minutes or so before the end of before the lunch break, which everybody's excited for, right? I would like each of you to tell me, the audience, 1 or 2 things that you want your students to come away with at the end of every school year or cycle of projects. We can start with Dan. What are the major things you want them to come away with?
I think as a school, we're constantly evolving. We're in our 5th year, and each year is better than the year before. This year, what I'm really thinking about is kids, the amount of ownership that they have over their own education. So realizing that they get to make choices. They get to arrive in the room and say, I'm gonna show up today and learn as much as I can, and that I'm not up. I use the example of YouTube versus like downloading a video, right? Like I want them to own the content that I give, as opposed to like viewing me as YouTube that they can continually come back to for the content. So it's like, I watched it, I can go back to Mr. Lacus and he'll give it to me again. So ownership and accountability for themselves, and trying to ask them to do more. It's about the questions we ask the kids to solve. So that's kind of the thing. Letting the kids struggle through it. It's if I see them on a math problem, they're not sure what to do. It's instead of my natural tendency, and I think many's natural tendency to help fix the problem for them, it's saying, I want you to go back and give it another 5 minutes, try on your own, and see what you can figure out. So I think like that's one big one. And then again, it's about the kids. So creating an environment for the kids to learn, feel supported, and a place where their curiosity is supported. So I think those are the 2 big ones.
Very good. And Jody, what would you say? You have kind of a bigger group of students than Dan.
Just 17,000.
Yeah, 47.
Give or take a few hundred. I think our goal is to create students with 21st century skills. So creativity, critical thinking, communication. I forgot the fourth C. It's there somewhere. So there's the 4 C's.
Curriculum, probably.
No, it's creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. Did I say that one? I'm sorry. My brain's shutting down already. She said lunch. I got distracted. All right. So we want them to, and most importantly, we want them to be able to persevere and to be resilient and to be able to solve problems. We want them to leave our system ready for college and career. And to do that, you have to be able to look at a problem, find a way to solve it. You have to be able to work with others. You have to be aware of what others are thinking and feeling. We want to create global citizens who can be productive in our society overall.
Nice, very nice. And Gary, what do you want your group to come away with?
So whenever we're working with any groups, certainly agency and autonomy are really important things, but I tend to work with students who maybe awe and curiosity isn't necessarily the thing that drives them in education. It may be survival or other factors. And so I like to leave the students that we work with with a feeling of awe and with their curiosity piqued, so that they have the drivers for education that we have a lot in the United States. Of course, there's certainly lots of areas where that is not true, but where they can be inspired to learn instead of feeling like they're learning to stay alive, which ironically circles back to Mars, because I guess at the end of that full circle, curiosity and awe drives us to stay alive.
That sounds wonderful. And do we have any questions from the audience? Ms. Alford has the mic.
Excellent panel. Yeah, a nice cross-section of education. Thank you. Do you have any collaborative groups that you're working with? I think you probably caught up in the immediacy of the demands of your job, but you often need to seek outside your local environment to figure out what kind of tools can enable you to bring things to your students. In San Diego, we had the San Diego Science Alliance, and that was through San Diego County Office of Education. I don't know if LA County Office provides any support for you or anything of that nature, but are there organizations you work with that you share your curriculum with and are able to get things back from the world?
So, for sure. We collaborate very closely with Caltech. We actually have grad students who teach at one of our schools, Science Lab, once a week. So they keep us current. LA County Office of Education does have a network for science specialists that we can get together and collaborate and talk to each other. And it's kind of a support group as we transition to the new standards and demands in education. So they are out there. I think it's definitely something that can be strengthened and continue to be built on. But they're out there. We just have to. And then we have the Science Educators Conference, which actually is happening in Pasadena this year. And this is where I'm going to brag a little bit. Pasadena Unified is a partner district for that conference here. So we'll have some workshops and strands that they're going to feature.
Just to let you know, the Mars Society has a published curriculum for Mars only. That is K through 12. It's on our education.marssociety.org website. I collaborate with educators all over the world through the Mars Society's WebEx and through an organization called NEPRIS. So anybody can email me and ask me for a class to teach at their organization or in their school or their astronomy club, and those are provided courtesy of the Mars Society.
I have two real quick shout outs. One is the Conrad Foundation. Nancy Conrad has a really novel and progressive way of doing design competitions for students. And the second is Ethics, Engineering Projects and Community Service at Purdue. They're kind of an early inspiration for me. They modified senior designs back in the early 90s so that they were community-based. And it really changed a lot about the way their engineering curriculum is set up and who participates in it in the school. And they're in like 53 countries now. Or I'm saying they have 53 universities around the world now. And and Explore Mars I collaborate with as well.
Okay, all three of you, you're serving very challenging groups. My compliments. Dan, I have toured the SpaceX factory. I had social relationships with 2 SpaceX engineers. My first wife was, her mother was a very successful businesswoman, self-made wealthy. And I learned long ago how painful it is for some child to live in the shadow of an incredibly successful parent. And do you encounter this? You know, obviously every child in that group, their moms and dads are incredible achievers. How does this affect the kids?
You know, I think each kid's different. And looking at them and supporting them in the best way possible is the best we can do. I think modeling hard work, accountability, ownership of their work, and then, you know, providing them positive feedback when they do well, and honest feedback when the work they're doing, then when we know they can do better, right? I know every single one of the 47 kids really, really well, because I teach them every single day. And so when the work's not where it needs to be, or what I know they're capable of, then giving them honest feedback to improve, and then praise when it's where it needs to be. I think just holding that compass for them and letting them stand on their own 2 feet, I think is, and seeing each kid for what they need as individuals too.
This is the last question.
Yes, to the panel and also to the lady representing Afghan girls. Are the Afghan girls doing anything about exploiting the tremendous mineral and gemstone resources of Afghanistan? A lot of people don't know that it's a resource-rich country, but they problems with that. Then to the panel in general, do you have anything going on in STEM programs in K through 12 where you have people of different ages and different grades involved in the same activity together, not cooperative, but across each group? Because that's what you're going to find in the real world later on.
So to your question, I don't know now that there isn't a current plan, but it's probably something that they can integrate into the plan. I imagine if asked now, they would probably say to themselves, they're designing very beautiful jewelry and they would like to source it for themselves there. It's my guess. But thank you for that great question.
In the integration across grades.
Yeah. I think for us, it's definitely central to our school. In A-Frame, the design class, the fabrication class, it is all mixed age groups. So very often we've got a 7-year-old working with a 14-year-old, completely mixed, and it brings out some of the coolest interactions, right? This 14-year-old, I think the empathy piece that comes from understanding where the 7-year-old is, you know, they see a 7-year-old that's kind of a little scared of using a hot glue gun, for example, and they can kind of understand what it was like. They're like, oh, I remember that. And then they're helping. And then the young one kind of will have this sense of curiosity, be like, we should build a huge thing. And the 14-year-old is kind of gets in and sees that as well. I think the cross age group piece there is really important. We also have kids, crossing paths. Like at lunch, it's all the kids together, all 7 to 14-year-olds, and then we have a lot of different programs I didn't mention, but one's called a LEAF, which is a week-long project. They get a new one each week, and they're kind of designed around some topic that we want them to gain knowledge of: politics, GDP, could be shipping routes, could be planets, could be anything. It's just like a project and exploration, and the entire school does those together. The oldest kids have higher expectations, but the kids are all talking about those in their independent time throughout the week. So I think that cross age piece is really important. It's been really beneficial for our school.
Wonderful. We have to break for lunch. Those of you who want to ask a question, the panel maybe stick around for a few minutes. Thank you so much for a wonderful audience. Thank you again to the panel. And the track talk started at 1 o'clock.
Just a quick announcement. Yes, take care of yourself. It is lunchtime. There are some places to eat across the street on Green Street. There's a mall with some restaurants that you can go to. The track talk in here is technology that starts at 1 o'clock in this room. All the rest of the other track talks, cultural, science, and outreach, are upstairs in room 204, 212, and 214 respectively. And we will then reconvene here in this room at 7 p.m. to continue our plenary discussions, and everything upstairs will be closed. So this is the room to be in at 7 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone, for an excellent start. Thank you.
The city of Long Beach wants to partner with you to create some special showcases for your kids' work.
Okay.
And it's going to be centered around Mars. It's called the Occupy Mars Learning Adventure. I'm going to be speaking at 1 o'clock about this whole thing, but I'll leave you my card.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're basically saying we have an opportunity for your kids in the city of Long Beach. And we've got, of course, the commitment of the aquarium and the mayor and all of that. So
very cool.
Thank you. Thank you
so
very
hope,
much.
hope we can
Yeah.
do some collaboration outside of
I'm actually going to be speaking.
Yeah, we love getting
So I'm actually president of Mars Academy USA.
All right.
And so I'm speaking this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I'm going to give you my card too.
For sure.
I'm Dr. Jim.
Nice to meet
So
you.
I would love to be able to see how we can chat as well. But I guess if you're going to be here this afternoon, and if you can
I have to get back to the office, unfortunately. Science education doesn't stop. Let me see
yes,
if
I know.
brought it.
Yes. So yeah, we deploy full immersion experiences here locally in
Oh,
Los
my
Angeles.
son's in immersion program.
Fantastic. Ours is focused on actually being a Martian.
Oh, okay.
And you're in, and it's similar to what MDRS is, but it's here locally at Vasquez Rocks in the Soledad Canyon. But we're a little bit different from what MDRS do, is that we focus on exponential technology. So when the participants come in, yes, they come into a mission, but then they work on the VR, AR, they do 3D printing, 4D printing.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I'd love to be able to chat to you and see how we can work together.
Unfortunately, the one thing I didn't bring with me, apparently, are business cards. They're probably in my car.
Or would you like to just do the old-fashioned way and write it
I
down?
think I have Post-it notes. Because I'm a teacher, so I keep Post-it notes with me, apparently.
I think defaulting back to the manual way is always there.
So I'm going to send you my email. I'm rarely in my office.
Right. Well, same here.
So this is the best way.
Fantastic. And you can check us out on our website
Yes,
as
I
well.
will.
And we have monthly missions. So yeah, we have one coming up in October. Anyway,
right.
we'll chat more.
Yes. No, that sounds good. It was nice to meet you. Thank you for sharing your information with me. It sounds great.
And you too.
Yes,
Take
thank you.
care. I was there. I remember you.
I know.
Exactly. I can't believe it.
Oh, yeah, went by pretty fast.
Well, I could just respond to you later.
So this woman, Maria, she has to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she proved she just moved her to a first level. She just moved her 3 years ago. Lives in New York. She's always been very nice to meet you.
Setting up our space, we had
Sorry.
So the girls can communicate.
So they
Cross.
Tell a friend
they can communicate in the students that the school where they are and they're at.
Right now, they kind of bake on them. Let me give it to the kids in why you're here. Right? I make it, I give it to the kids, I explain it to them, and then I work out all the kinks. And then it's kind of like, okay, that's done. Now I gotta make a new project for the next one, right? I'm not. Yeah. We're working on a way to get it out there that way.
The whole space program is about funding. I talked to the guy who runs the former founder. He says, you got to get to Washington. And all of these have outreach.
Or entrepreneurs these days.
Yeah, they're not entrepreneurs. It's about getting funding.
government funding or private funding. Because whatever the public officials do is, in education, the PTA is a strong guiding force.
Yeah. Well, they got it set aside.
Yeah, right. Well, they're private, I believe, my consensus is they're private, where the kids have to pay for
Some states have outsourcing.
No, that's great, thank you.
So do you get?
It's what had that emphasis you want to local. It's great to see you guys in action.
But at some conferences where all of the schools and talks are reloaded, you guys have so many numbers as well, or we just find it out.
Yeah, that's all about.
Tomorrow's aeronautical museum in Compton. We did a lot of collabs and stuff, and I've done things since with them. Robin, I'm happy to introduce you to Robin Pecker. He's a health pilot, credits, and he decided that he's at the kids come in, and they weren't going to get credit, and they expend their credit.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got this sorority and pre-aircraft day.
Thank you.
I did a planet day. Sorry. And we did a scale model of it. So to scale, where Jupiter's this big, the sun is this big, but we're not under the run. And we did start walking. And then, oh yeah, that is beautiful. This is a little bit smaller, but we scaled down to the airport, because by the time you get up to Europe, Neptune, where's the sun? And then when you come back, you're walking around, it's like, geez, I'm getting hungry, we get some water. Oh, we're at Mars, we're almost home. It's like, yeah, there's the Earth, here's Mars. Really, in your house is the other planet. So I have a printable card that I PDF, share with people, and you print it out, but then you have to walk out this many meters to scale this, and you can really see it.
Well, then tell them, we're at the same scale, where's the light here?
Oh, yes, in Texas. You know, the Texas test site was Alpha Centauri. That was the next thing to go. And the other thing was, when we're all scattered here, and you look at the sun, and you can see the sun is that far. We spent the first part of the class talking about scale. You know, 1/6 scale Barbie is this big. But you look at that sun, and then you look up, and that sun, they are the same scale when you're on the Earth orbit. When you're at Venus's orbit, the sun is bigger, so, you know, experience.
And the other planets, it's all.
Actually, remember, you have a feeling of how far it is.
And see, you touch it, you taste it, all the senses, and then it sticks with it. And that's what's so great about well, let lunch.
Afghanistan.
Keep up the great work. I sure am. Yeah, I worked with.
Are your credits on transferring, or you? I don't know how California works.
It's not officially
About some states.
But they like to encourage us to kind of time off and spend 15
Yeah, so-
of your time.
Oh,
sure.
well, no animation. I mean, the only animation is like you start here. So
a teacher, but you got two. Not my background is in economics, business. But Josh's national credit, so his background is a museum, and then
physical space.
yeah, wow,
it's probably sensitive enough. I don't have to write it down.
each year, 8 kids, now we're
So it's a fee, it's a fingertip sense.
Yeah, we have a tuition, but it's 100% of them should if I am. So, we are kind of encouraged
Yeah, I got it.
We take the best kids that we can.
Are they always play these games?
We're seeing a couple of years ago. So we went for
some kids that are.
Yep. Yep. Good source. Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes that means bringing kids. Superlative of determination.
Well, maybe the ability to just
Focus.
Yeah, that's right. And that bit of the whole stuff that you have last week. Only to have lunch, yeah.
That's what they can
I guess that's what it takes. Yeah. So we bring a lot of that.
And you know, and obviously probably bullying and all of that other, or you got ways to handle that. Yeah. But you're developing social skills as well. For sure. Cutting across age groups and talk about things like that. You get to talk about things that you can't talk about in public school.
For sure. And we talk a lot about how do we keep supportive to each other.
Social dynamics.
Cooperative
and a team thing. You don't get to Mars by yourself.
Yeah. Well, there was this emphasis for a long time about individuality and stand up,
right? That's
do your own thing.
NASA scientist Pascal
Which is
came up
great.
with electronic confinement, so
But
they started
it also
manufacturing
creates
things inside
a view of isolation
and
and
we're all going to Mars, so keep that.
collaboration.
Do you have a car?
Yes, it's talking exclusively based on that.
Young people who
So that does the space exactly.
there's a research station. And I have to talk about stuff, was the Russian commander after the Soviet War.
Because Roger had SpaceX. They got the first Mars. All of you on this place.
School. They actually social problem. That was just
tours for their classes, right? Second grade.
Actually just presentation personally.
And you can go to tour too. The oldest.
And they're actually get involved, we got a crew, that's one. Obviously, so people have got disciplines and no one person can do it, so no matter how lousy one of the other people is, or they develop a problem, or whatever it is, they're stuck there. So they gotta live with it, whatever. It is possible conceivably that somebody could withdraw and just. Then what do the other people do when they have one of the people manifest this problem?
Yeah, he said it falls east. I thought that's what's wrong. It'll fall west.
In a roundabout way, diplomatic. Really needs to be done, but yet how you score, you get a bunch of psychologists together.
Yeah,
What's the energy? What's the group dynamics?
Okay, I am all set. Thank you very much.
For the most part.
Yeah.
What is the energy?
So, it's not the energy that has some sort of around the equator from two times.
But it is concentrated back on.
Only for that simulation is 100% intact. No issues, no errors.
So like this.
But I don't fall off the back. What about competition of the elevator?
I didn't even get shoes. Not somebody's putting pressure on her.
Right.
And then the culture, the team members are all from the same country. And they're different cultures. In that situation.
Yeah, no, I was thinking.
Another question is, okay, you got the girls. Is there any equivalent for the men? What are they in? That's right. So the girls are obviously from China. And money talks.
Yeah.
Money solves all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
If you buy it,
Well, override politics and power.
if you got enough money. But
If you threaten them, they just take it out.
well, yeah,
Those kinds of
those kind of things. So
Probably going on, I mean, it's been evolving, it's probably about 3 years.
those gals, if they get on with this, probably gonna find residents outside of Afghanistan doing work.
I was
safely outside of Oh, I'm sure, because people, I mean, people are a member of the Taliban just to be able to feed their families. Well, what other kind of work? Well, you know, they've got enough. They've got enough opium researchers. You have legal and illegal, both kinds, and it's a source of income, but that's seasonal. That's seasonal work. And so that's the other part of this. You're getting paid by being a soldier on whichever side right now.
So thanks for presenting that.
Oh,
It's a good model
Yeah.
to try and export.
Yeah, it's really, you're absolutely right. It's part of the greater mission that we want to do. Gotta get it right. And so we're actually close. We might have. No, we want it to be free.
Or copyrighted somehow or something like that.
We're gonna have a negotiation where we all have secret goals, secret.
Secret agenda.
Yeah, I want to increase your nuclear arsenal, you want to increase funding, you want to, whatever. But like, you can't just send that out, right? Like, that is a topic that's like, our kids are pretty open to.
But you can talk about things that you can't.
Well, what is it
talk
that you?
about in public.
Those are nuclear markets, right? Like some, I think if we just plaster that out, I don't think that is speaking. So there's these different layers. Trying to figure out how to make this feel tags.
Do you teach the philosophy of Sun Tzu? The greatest victory is the battle that is never fought.
I think I'll just stay.
That is definitely. No, you guys are state. Informed diplomacy, working across our lines. United States is very forward in terms of how we select foreign ambassadors. Most of the leading countries in the world, ambassadors work their way up from the bottom. And they have much more sophisticated, I mean, they've been doing it 1,000 years, or the Chinese 5,000 years. It's weird, the new kids on the block. But understanding foreign affairs and intercultural differences and linguistic differences are significant. And this comes back to your question. There was I can't remember the different people who were the different nationalities that were last year when they did their desert research thing. But there's dynamics going on there that aren't even discussed in the countries that the people come from. They're non-issues. That all men are this or whatever the way they think is the thinking. And how do you learn to? Over the years, I've learned how to see my country from the eyes of a German, from a Russian, from different people that I've known and worked with over the years. And you know, when you get to North Orange long enough, you can finally ask them a question. But when you get off the boat or whatever, and you walk down the street, what was your first reaction? One of the big things for the West Europeans is people want to speak. It's like losing your house because you can't afford medical care, or dying, choosing to die, versus because there'll be some kind of insurance thing that will help them. And these are things that people in some places of the world don't even worry about.
But ask you about the program that you just described.
Oh, yeah. Relocate.
Trying to teach them negotiation skills, or trying to teach them communication skills, all of it. Yeah, I mean, but there was something you had in your mind when you first started.
That one was my mind. Godfrey in that one. He does a lot of mostly stuff on Google Sheets, but it ends up being really something. I give them a big data set and how to cross the threshold of 2 degrees Celsius from that. How do we predict that we'll walk but in that one, there's a lot of this just it's all this emotional stuff, but we've got this background in nice leaps that I mentioned briefly where we learn about different countries. Every kid in the school has about it. And they go through all these like from these activities like every week. So we want them to apply it and then like placing themselves in a situation where you have to first make it's kind of an interesting place to be. So placing that and then negotiations. None of them. There's a way for everybody to accomplish all of it. One person thought they got too powerful. Thought they were too powerful, and they're like, everybody needs. We want more money. Or our open growth. Yeah.
How many of them were frustrated?
All of them. That's greater. And it turns out to be definitely. You have 2 examples. Ends up being players. One of the kids that playing. It's being one of those. My lesson from that, where actually talked about like just